Hi guys, we are waiting for the other students before we as we get ready to begin the class. We only have 5 students. We're waiting on the others. But I have a very interesting class for you today. Today we will talk about the last class we ended just speaking generally about some general themes. We didn't get a chance to get into socio-economic context of Jamaica, the Caribbean. And today I want to get into that a little bit, talking about Jamaica, and lifting up the introduction of neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty and business, where I laid the foundation, talking about Jamaica from the 1980s up to the present, in terms of its economic history. So we're going to get into that. And when we talk about Jamaica, some of the economic history might mirror some of what's going on in other parts of the Caribbean. But I'm going to lift up from chapter 1 of the book Neoliberalism, providing some theoretical foundation. The book Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Business, which was part of my thesis. My hypothesis was that neoliberal restructuring, income inequality, which is part A of the book, is entitled Neoliberal Restructuring, Income Inequality and Poverty in Jamaica from the mid-1970s. Today I will share a little bit from that book, and the chapters I'm going to be lifting up from the introduction, chapter 3, which looks at the socio-economic context of Jamaica. We're going to also be talking about a little bit about Garveyism and Caribbean Bonism, which was the last time, but we never got the chance. We never got the chance to get into it. But that will be my lecture presentation for today. I will lift up some themes and the discussions from the introduction and chapter on Garveyism and the chapter on Caribbean Bonism. We're not going to have time to look at some other stuff that I want to explore today, which there is some articles. If you go to Jacobin, and I think I asked, I had asked Chantel to send it to you guys, a link to the Jacobin magazine, and in it there are some articles and essays written about Caribbean, which might interest you, which I also want to spend some time talk about, if we have time to talk about it today. When we talk about looking at diverse currents, I want to look at 3 or 4 individuals who are instrumental, which is Walter Rodney is one. Walter Rodney, and he wrote an article in the Jacobin before he was assassinated, before he was killed, entitled Walter Rodney and the Struggle for Democracy in Guyana. And of course, Walter Rodney was a historian and an important political leader in Guyana. So he's one figure that is important, the one that I want to talk about a little bit today. And I also want to talk a little bit about Grenada's revolution, which should never be forgotten, which was written by Ronan Birkshaw in 2019 and published in Jacobin. There's also a story an essay entitled In the Era of Decolonization, West Indies Cricketers Refused to Grovel, a story written by Megan Day, 2021, which looks at cricket and how cricket was. When you want to study Caribbean society, you look at our music, you look at our sports, and you look at how the music and the sports has transformed from the 1960s to now, from the 1970s to now, which would suggest the kind of growth and the kind of development Jamaica or the Caribbean has had in terms of its socioeconomics or its racial makeup and so on and so forth. Because cricket was dominated by there was one time, if you're black, you couldn't be captain of the West Indies cricket team, or if you're too dark. But so we want to talk about. I want to share some of Megan Day's article looking at the era of decolonization. West Indies cricket refused to grovel. There is also another essay that I want to share is called C.L.R James and the Black Jacobins of Haiti. That's one. And of course, finally, Bob Marley's peace gesture supported radical change in Jamaica, talking about an iconic 19th. And there is a story written by Brian Meeks, he's Jamaican, 2021, June 30, 2021, showing a picture of Bob Marley, and beside Bob Marley, sandwiched by Bob Marley, JLP Edward Siaga, PNP's Michael Manley. And they talk about that image. What is that image? And if you the film Who Shot the Sheriff, which I won't play in today's class, but the next class we will show the film Who Shot the Sheriff, and then probably we'll talk about Bob Marley's peace initiative, peace gesture, which supported radical change in Jamaica. I think, and that's where we were. Those are. Oh, there's another article written in 2022 by Paul Prescott entitled "How C.L.R James Helped in the Racial Hierarchy of West Indies Cricket," and I just mentioned that racial hierarchy. So there are two articles that speaks to. So there are two articles that speaks to the. I'm outdoors today, having classes outdoors. I am outdoors, and you get to see the background, but I'm outdoors today. But you get to understand those two articles there are two articles about cricket. One written by Paul Prescott that speaks to how C.L.R James helped end the racial hierarchy of West Indies cricket. And anything else that I want to share, I think that's about it. And that will be about it. Now, I was speaking with Chantel earlier, and Chantel spoke with me about, oops, did I pause something? Chantel spoke with me today about some issues regarding immigration, but we only have 7 students, so I won't get into the class. But I had a very important talk with Chantel today, and I hope we get a chance to get into it. Chantel spoke with me about the issue of immigration, and she also sent a video, which I hope I could play a little bit of it today for you, because it was quite telling, which changed my whole idea of immigration and the kind of immigration that occurs in the Caribbean, and particularly Jamaica, because when you talk about immigration and travel and border, we never think about Caribbean in terms of entering the US through borders. And by borders, I mean through land. It was always by sea or by air. But today we're hearing, of course, there is this Mexico. Mexico is an interesting, we're hearing that Jamaicans are now crossing the border. Probably it's been happening for a while, I'm not sure, via the Mexican border. But that was quite an interesting story, which I hope I get a chance to probably talk about immigration and how Jamaicans and Caribbean people are immigrating, and the fact and the kind of pushback Jamaicans are having. I understand that many Jamaicans are banned from traveling to other countries that shares border with Mexico or just back that the usual route that they come into through Mexico. That's an interesting mix here that we could probably discuss. So I will wait for probably 10 more minutes, and then we will begin at 7:30. Hopefully that by then we will have all the students. I don't like to start the class until we have at least 15 students, 14 to 15, so that we start the course. So give us a couple minutes, and if there's anything you want to share as it relates to what's going on in Jamaica, we can lift that up today. Okay, give us a few minutes. We will begin momentarily.
Okay, sir.
Chantel, can you share that video that you sent me earlier? Can you share it in this chat so I can actually probably play it and share it with the class?
In the chat, sir. Let me try, sir.
Yes. That'd be great. It was quite a that was a powerful, that's an interesting. Actually, I really learned, I didn't know much about what was going on with Jamaica and the and in terms of Mexico and our relations with Mexico. But there is that breaking story that we're hearing. That's really breaking story. Actually, if you think about it, it's breaking story. It's a breaking story that Chantel shared with me today, which I really wanted an opportunity to jump on. So I never get a chance. Yes.
Sorry, sir. It is a YouTube video, so you have to either share from your screen or.
Yes, I'll share it from my screen then. But if you okay, let me see if I could bring it up. Share the okay. Can you share the link in the video in the chat so I'll bring it up, and once I bring it up, then it will open up. Let me see if I can bring it.
Okay, sir, I will.
If you could do, let me see if I already have it here. You sent it in an email or by WhatsApp, but I don't have WhatsApp on this device.
I sent in an email as well, sir.
Oh, you did. Okay, let me check the email. Come on. Let's go to the inbox. Border crossing. It's entitled, here we go. It's entitled Border Crossing. Jamaican woman details failed attempt to enter USA via Central America. Actually 3 minutes.
It is in the chat as well, sir.
Oh, great. Let me go back to my Zoom here. There we go. You did send it. So there it is, guys. Chantal just shared it with everyone on thinking about immigration. Actually, I did. Since we're talking about it, actually, I did an article speaking about. So I'm going to play it for you guys in a second, but let me see if I could find that article on immigration. I wrote an article in the Neoliberal, which is entitled, "You Cannot Fix the Immigration Problem Without Addressing the International Competition Between Countries That Makes Rich Countries Richer and Poorer Countries Poorer." Then, you cannot fix the immigration problem. You cannot fix the immigration problem without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. And I'm going to share a little bit from that in a second. But before I do that, let me bring up. Where is the Zoom window? Let me go to share screen, right? Oh no, that's not what I was trying to do. Email. Then go back to this. Okay, guys, listen to this video. That Chantal shared this with me earlier, and I thought it was very important. And I would love for Chantel to also probably spend some time to lead the discussions around this a little bit. This is very important. And I'm going to also talk about the issue of immigration, which is not what we're going to be talking about fully today, but it's a hot button topic. And as Caribbean, as young scholars, we not only do we want to talk about history as it informs the present and think about the future, but we also, as modern day young thinkers, we also want to contribute to academic, contribute to commentary, contribute to thinking. And I want to play a story from YouTube that's taken from TVJ. It's entitled Border Crossing, Jamaican Woman Details a Failed Attempt. It's only 3 minutes. Here it is. And let me ensure that I'm sharing the audio. I don't think I'm sharing the audio. So, what do I share? Let's share the share sound. There we go.
News. And a special welcome once again to our viewers on onespotmedia.com.
Up first this evening, the number of Jamaicans being refused entry by the Panamanian government is increasing.
Now it's believed that they're using the route to get to Mexico with the hope of crossing the border into the United States.
Now our reporter Jamila Maitland spoke with one of them.
Getting to the United States by any means necessary. It's the story of several Jamaicans who've been using the alternative means to get to the US. It has forced the government of some Central American countries to be wary of Jamaican travelers. According to the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, PICA, between January 1, 2018 and March 31, 2023, 2,167 Jamaicans were refused entry by the Panamanian government. 2,055 of them occurred at the beginning of 2020. During that same period, 143 Jamaicans were refused entry by the Mexican government. We spoke to a woman who we'll call Pam, who was among the statistics.
People with criminal offenses Panama don't accept them. So I can't use Panama to go to the next country and I can't come into them country, period.
But that's not stopping Pam, who is in her 50s, from trying again. She revealed that several of her friends have successfully crossed the border and are now working and sending money back home.
If you use all your money and when you reach Mexico, Mexico still don't accept you. You understand? Some of the country, they must accept you, so it's a risk and you have to pray and just hope everything must work out. It's a risky plan. But once Mexico accept you, you feel more, you understand, because you're nearer to your goal, you're nearer to your journey.
And you said, will you be taking another trip again to try to see?
Yes, a trip to reach right here. I'm not staying.
Not staying in Jamaica because of the lack of opportunities for people her age, the level of crime and violence, and the cost of living. However, according to Foreign Affairs Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, it's not only a dangerous trek, but it can affect legitimate travelers. She revealed that several Jamaicans are also detained in immigration centers in the U.S. after being arrested at the border.
Actions and decisions like this, they really do fight against the efforts of the government, and they do affect the reputation of the passport and the immigration experience of our lawful travelers.
Minister Johnson-Smith listed several programs that the government has embarked on for youth. But for Pam, she explains it's not enough.
Crime have a lot to do with it too. But then you have people who have a lot of kids who don't want to see them kids, you know? They want to have stuff. People want house, people want car, people want to live lavish.
And you don't think you can achieve that in Jamaica?
Jamaica money, the value. Jamaica money don't have any value. You have to work the whole of your life to even own something. It's hard up there too, because people are ball the same way, but I mean, it's more opportunity. It's bigger, it's wider. It's 52, 53 states. I mean, you could go you're here and nothing not happen for you, you try somewhere else. But everything better, everything. The environment, the houses, your clothes, your appearance, everything is way different to me.
Jamila Maitland, TVJ News.
So that was a story, short story from TVJ entitled Border Crossing, Jamaican Woman Details Failed Attempt to Enter US via Central America. And we're hearing now that, many Jamaicans are trying to cross or come to the U.S. through Mexico. There were other means. Of course, they were trying. Of course, it was by air, but of course now we're hearing of Mexico. My question to you is: we hear if you listen, says that she's traveling, and they are willing to take these risks to come to the U.S. and whatever the risk, they are willing to take that risk, the risk to come to the U.S. And they're saying that according to this Jamaican, lack of opportunities, the money is not worth much, and of course the interviewer pointed to the fact that Jamaica is doing their best in terms of providing opportunities for young people, and so forth. They said it's not enough. What are your views as it relates to what's going on, and why people would take that risk? And I mean, probably you can discuss it among yourself. Would you take that risk if you're provided with that risk, with that opportunity? Take that risk. Would you take it? Yes.
Sir, all right. So one, we're talking about opportunities for young people, right? They do have programs here, but the thing is that they have farms that can get person to farm work and stuff like that in the US or Canada, but not everyone has access to it here because you have to be voting. It's like a whole politics thing, sir. To be honest, they don't want to give any person to someone opportunity, so they give their friends or they link here or whatever. So not all persons have that access to these opportunities. For your questions about if the person will do that, well, no persons out here does have a proper education, right? So they will take any opportunity that they can get to the US by any means. There are persons who have let them degree, so they wouldn't probably try that because they would want to go illegally. But then for persons who are undereducated and all that, they want to go there using that means.
Okay, that's powerful. That was a good response. Thank you so much. And my question for you, Chantel, you shared this video. Tell me about this particular. You actually discussed this with me earlier. Tell me about the story, in relation to what's going on. And other members of the class, you can join. What is going on in Jamaica in terms of this border crossing into Mexico, and how it creates problem for Jamaica, and I also understand there is also this gun for drug trade, which is also impacting Jamaica. So give us your thoughts on this, Chantel. You were having a discussion with me about this earlier.
Okay, sir. All right. So for one, over the years, person has been going through the border, but now it has become because person started videoing, taking pictures, and sending out even before they go across the border. Even at the border, they're taking pictures and videoing and sending it out on social media. So a lot of other persons is also crossing the border. And not in Jamaica, the US embassy is not issuing out any visa up until about 2024.
Wait, hold on. Wait, the US, let me ask you. The US embassy, that's the US embassy in Jamaica, they're not issuing Jamaicans any visa.
No, sir.
Until 2024.
Yes, sir.
And this is
like for applicants. Yes, sir.
Say that again.
Like for persons who are applying now, they won't get you until 2024 because they were a backup. I think due to the whole COVID-19, the whole COVID-19, so they have a backup of persons who are supposed to come for interviews. So persons who are applying now or even last year won't be getting to till about maybe 2024, 2025 around that time. The persons are using the means of the border to get into the US.
Oh wow! Wait. So hold on. This is quite interesting. So when did this? Is this a new thing in Jamaica where people were using, or is it as a result of the backlog in terms of visas? In Jamaicans getting visas and having appointments to go to be interviewed for visas, or the fact that they're not issuing visas until 2024. Did this start in 2018? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's all right. Personally, I always try to find a means to get to the US. They would try to go on a boat, but no, personally, find a new way where they could go to Mexico and just cross, so they can go to Panama and get into Mexico and then also across the border. So, for me, I know that in order to do that, you have to have money, because you have to take more than one flight to get to the Mexican border, as well as you have to pay. I think you have to pay some immigrants, I think officers at the border to go across, for them to take you across into the US, and then someone can pick you up in the US. I think somewhere in New York or somewhere of that sort. So that's what I know of, because I have family members and friends who have been across the border, and they tell you what you're going to need, how much money you have to have, and all that stuff, sir.
And I'm thinking that, reaching...
It's also hard. It's also hard, even before the whole COVID thing, it's also hard because sometimes they get a visa, because sometimes you apply for a visa and when they go, they turn you down as well. Because you don't have any ties in Jamaica to go for them to give you the visa to go to the US, because they'll tell that you're going to run off or something. So sometimes it's hard to get a visa even before the whole COVID-19. Yes, sir. So persons try to find other means to get to the US over where they can.
Now, earlier you talked about the fact that how American or US immigration officials are also involved in this scheme, which also help to facilitate the travel between Jamaica, the border relations, because there are US immigration officials who are also receiving money under the table to help transfer
person across the border.
Yes. It's quite so. America are greasing their pockets as well. In one extent, there are Americans who, and we have more border patrol officers and so on and so, whose job is to help to prevent crossing the border. But there are those. But of course, there's a lot. You're saying that there's a lot of corruption at the border.
Very much so, sir. Very much so.
Any other students would like to chime in on this? Nadia, Patrice, Christine? Anybody?
Good evening, sir. I'm just in, so I'm just
Nadia,
listening.
good evening. Yes, welcome. Well, any comments on the video regarding what's going on in terms of Jamaicans are now crossing into Mexico crossing into the US via Mexico, moving away from moving as a result of the new regulations and new policies that's now limiting and preventing Jamaican ability through what we are used to.
Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, sir.
Christine, good evening.
I must say that my knowledge of this is very limited. I, matter of fact, just started hearing about it. I haven't paid much attention to it. But I can concur with what Ms. Gordon had said earlier, in that it's quite difficult for some persons to get into the US. And in spite of how hard it is when you get there, I mean, you have to work multiple jobs. The state of our currency makes getting into the US very attractive for our locals. And so people will be doing all they can to get into the US. They know that when they get in, they can get jobs where they're paid, quote unquote, under the table, where taxes and so on is not an issue. And so based on the earnings, the living they can earn here, it's much better for them to be in the US, in spite of how hard it is, in spite of the ill treatment at times. They'll still take that over what they can get here. Because when you compare $10 US to $10 Jamaican, then you know what we're talking about. I know that when you go to the embassy, if you don't have, especially for the past maybe 10 years, even more than before, if you don't have significant ties to the country, it's very hard for you to get a visa. I remember going to the embassy with a friend some years ago, and I mean maybe 5 years ago, and I remember a young lady coming out and she threw herself on the ground and she was just wallowing and going on. Quite honestly though, if I were that officer, I wouldn't give her the visa either, because it was screaming that she was seeking opportunity. She was not she was very ill and unkept. Her hair wasn't combed properly. But that aside, it tells you that if you aren't looking a certain way, if you don't have, I mean, there are persons that I know that goes and that big bag of money that you need to have in your bank account is not taken into consideration at all. There are persons that just get through, but then there are persons who have to prove all of this. And as I said, the opportunities there in terms of what Jamaicans can send back, because most Jamaicans, they go send back money for my ass. So based on that, they'll always seek the opportunities. But in terms of using Mexico as a new method, I can't comment on that because I don't have much knowledge of it.
Okay. Thank you so much. By the way, I am asking a question. It's going to be a poll. You cannot fix the immigration problem without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. Actually, a true and false question. It's not necessarily a true and false question. It's really either you agree or actually I'm going to change it. Agree, or you can say agree, or you can choose that you disagree. Right? And then we are going to, that's it. Save this. Now I'm going to edit it. Let's edit this. Or we'll call it immigration. All right, I have a poll now. Only 11 students in the class. We don't have a quorum, which is not good. But I will. I usually like to start with a quorum. Okay, 20 questions in the class. 15. So I hope there will be 10 students. But hopefully they all join. But in the meantime, you can participate in the poll or in the question. You cannot fix the immigration problem without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer, poor countries poorer. What am I talking about? But of course, maybe it's clear, but it's a clear-cut question. But think about it, and probably think about some opinions about it, and then we will briefly discuss in about 2 minutes, and I'll share with you an article that I wrote as it relates to immigration. We're not talking about immigration today. I was actually buying some time to just talk about some issues in the news today, especially with what Chantal Burton had shared in terms of what's going on in Jamaica. And also she talked about gun for drug trade and how Mexico and the US, there's also this gun for drug, and also how guns are coming into Jamaica through Mexico, okay? And how that's a new kind of relationship, how that creates a new relationship in terms of Mexico, and how it creates, and how one problem creates another. Close down the normal.
Excuse me, sir, I am not hearing you. Are you hearing me?
I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me? Okay, answer the question. I'll get my mic and I will join.
Patrice?
Yeah, I was wondering if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, man.
Okay.
There's some static in the background, though, Patrice.
Right, me?
Some static in your background.
It's the fun.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear Miss Morton.
Okay, guys, I am back. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we can.
Better. All right, there we go. All right, so let me see. 10 out of 10 persons participated. We cannot fix the immigration problem without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. All right, and 10 out of 10 of you agreed. Okay, great. Let me look at there is an article I did some time ago. If I could bring it up. It's in the neoliberal.com. Harry Enton wrote an article in CNN Politics entitled "Why President Biden Has an Immigration Policy Problem." And according to Enton, the issue is one of the first that puts Biden and his administration between a rock and a hard place. It's not clear, looking at the data, how to politically deal with the issue. For one thing, a flow of illegal immigration across the border divides the democratic process. Across the border is talking about Mexico borders, Mexico, US. But I responded. This was an article he wrote March 27, 2021. And of course, I had responded and writing a short article indicating that Biden's problems are bigger than Mr. Henton. It's not just a political issue in terms of, when I talk about the issue of immigration, it's not just an internal political problem in a country such as the US. You cannot fix the immigration problem without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. Rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. And why, and I don't know if anyone has ever, I don't know if we have thought about immigration in that sense, looking at it like that in that sense, okay? In terms of competition. Because I asked the question, where is the will to prop up another country? Because one of the policy initiatives is that, okay, fine, let us invest in the Caribbean in such a way where their people have so much opportunities that they don't need to travel outside. But of course, if that happens, but what is the upside or the downside of that? That's the question. The question is, how do we prevent immigration, the immigration problem? How do we minimize it? Okay, fine. Let us invest in some of these countries. Okay, especially poorer countries, developing countries, and their peoples. But then there is but when you invest in these countries, is the money, where are the monies going? Is it targeted enough? Is it going to the poor people, to the people who usually travel or who usually break laws in order to develop stability in another country, such as the US, seeking opportunity? That's an important question that we have to ask ourselves. Yes? But beyond that question that I just raised, beyond that, and we watched the video from Pam, the Jamaican who's crossing into Mexico. It was a failed attempt, but she's going to try again and again and again, because for her and for many immigrants from the global south coming to the global north, they are looking for opportunities, and for many, and it's always the same argument. Any immigrant we speak to, especially those of a particular pedigree, they're going to say the same thing. They came looking for opportunities. And of course, yes, there are more opportunities in a first world country. It's a given. There are more opportunities in a first world country. Okay? But than in probably their own countries, because there are limitations, limited resources. And so therefore, the question is, how do we deal with the issue of, okay, we will invest in these other countries? And the reason why, and then the question is, why immigration is a problem in terms of illegal immigration? Many of the countries of the global south, or people who are vulnerable, poor people who are traveling, always looking for opportunity. They have been affected by deindustrialization. They have been affected by what we're talking about, globalization or neoliberal globalization, this penetration of the global north into the global south, which has, since the 1960s, 70s, which has affected these countries, and then of course through IMF and World Bank and the oil crisis creating debt. You know, they have to get loans, and the loans come with conditions which has eviscerated these global south markets. Okay, so because they're now lacking opportunities, agriculture is displaced or whatever the case might be, they are traveling looking for opportunity, and they will do so, and they will take the risk to do so. But I say to you, you cannot fix the problem, the immigration problem, without addressing the international competition between and among countries that makes rich countries richer and poor countries poorer. So I say to you, if the policy initiative is to invest into the global south countries and their people, the question, of course, we are faced with the issue. If America and these first world countries were to invest in these global south countries in such a way that it developed these countries so that their people will have opportunities, of course, it means that it would pose a problem. It means that there's more competition in the world. Can people afford that? The question is, where is the will to prop up? So the question is, where is the will to prop up another country so that their people no longer need to travel or to migrate? Where is the will to prop up another country so that that country people, the country, their people will no longer need to travel or migrate? For in effect, to do so, to make Jamaica like, say, a Singapore, whose people enjoy the benefits of high growth, export, and incomes, would then mean that Jamaica becomes a more viable and competitive economy, who will then become part of the competition. So then, this put any strategy to fix immigration by working with another country in perspective. Therefore, if Biden's strategy to fix immigration is to provide assistance to these countries whose poor peoples are coming to the US illegally, would mean creating another situation where such a country like Jamaica becomes too competitive, unless the fix is to provide aid that continues dependency. Provide aid, unless the fix, the solution, the resolve is to provide aid, which has always been the case, aid that continues dependency. Further, immigration had always followed a draconian policy. Notice I said this. Immigration had always followed a draconian policy based on race. So there is another side of this issue. Of course, when we talk about brain drain it could be a disadvantage, a consequence of immigration. Brain drain. But it could be a problem or it could be a benefit. And I talk about that in the book, Neoliberalism. And if you look at how brain drain has benefited countries of the global south, then you probably might want to think twice when you connect and link up brain drain with remittances and how remittances provide the GDP in many of the global south countries, and how an important factor that is when you think about GDP. There is, however, immigration, there's another side we have to think about. I am saying to you that immigration had always followed a draconian policy, which is why we see the people who normally migrate or immigrate illegally, say for example, would take the risk as to travel to Panama and other countries and take the journey that they would, and the lengths that it would take them to travel and to come to a first world country. It is because immigration had always followed a draconian. When you look at the people who travel or migrate illegally from the global south into the global north, and those who use Mexico and who go at people who use certain lengths, people who go out of the extreme to migrate or to get to the global south country are usually people of color or people of the global south. So the point I'm making here is that immigration had always followed a draconian policy based on race, class, and income. Say, for example, of course, and I think Chantel referenced this, and Christine probably, I think, referenced this as well, looking at income. I believe so. Both of you referenced that, which was quite powerful, quite important. I said that immigration had always followed a draconian policy based on race, and we talk about ties. I remember this is my experience, the first time I applied for a visa to come to the US, I was denied. They said I never had enough ties, I think. But I was not looking to come to the US. I was being pressured by my family to come to the US because there was a wedding, and they said, why you don't want to come? So it took me a long time before I decided that, okay, I'm ready to travel to the US. I applied, I was denied. They said I never had enough ties. And when we say they don't have enough ties, they don't have enough, they said, according to them, ties means you don't have enough, you don't have a job, or probably you're not married, you don't have enough income, or you don't have enough connections to the island, to Jamaica. Probably.
No, sir.
What does that
mean? Ties mean that you don't have a house, children, a husband, a good job where you pay good money. That's what ties. That's what I mean by ties. Sir.
Yeah, good, right. Connection.
No, you have assets in Jamaica to hold it back here.
Your assets, family, lineage. Probably if you're single, I was single at the time. If you're single, then that's probably, it's very difficult.
Yes, sir, very difficult.
If you're single, and if you are not connected with an institution that's having an exchange program or something of the sort. I was training to be a pastor, so that was how I initially came to the US the first time, through the United Church and the programs that they had. But the first time I applied, just for visitors to visit, to go to a wedding or something of the sort, I was denied. But that was, but they said I never had enough ties. Probably I never had a house, land, marriage, as Chantel says. But really, you cannot fix it. But I've said that you can't. But the point is I'm making here that immigration had always followed a draconian policy based on race, class, ties, incomes, where the best and brightest who have ties, the best and brightest who have ties, gets to escape the realities of their colonies, gets to escape the realities of their colonies. Again, gets to escape the realities of their colonies, leaving their nascent, and by nascent means fledgling, just coming to be, yeah, leaving their nascent lands devoid of brilliance and labor. That part talked about brain drain, leaving their nascent land devoid of brilliance and labor that could translate in helping the former colony. So in other words, you have to have ties, you have to have connections, you have to have. Yet this very policy is what benefits the post-industrial countries of the global north, a policy that identifies two types of immigrants, one from the north and another from the south. One that is white and another that is Anglo-Saxon, and another that is black or brown. One that is connected and has ties, and another that is not. So that such discriminatory policy created a situation where people who really need to immigrate or to migrate find it harder to do so, vis-a-vis their other countrymen of higher esteem who are more welcomed, or might I say, when I say higher esteem, I should put that in quote, who are more welcomed creating a brain drain for the former colonies of the global South, like Jamaica, of course. But this situation is good or beneficial to maintain power and control. It provides the opportunity that allows post-industrial countries to continue holding the advantage within a highly competitive world. When you think about it in terms of a competitive system, you know, when we think about Jamaica in relation to the world, we have to think about, and when we think about as Jamaicans and as people in the world, we have to think about things in terms of cross-border relations or country. We are living in a very competitive world. So part of where Jamaica finds itself, or the global South countries finds itself, is as a result of strategy stemming from competition. We live in a competitive world. So therefore, we have to think, when we think about immigration and policies surrounding immigration and how it affects people of color and people of the global South and people of the Caribbean, and the fact that people of the Caribbean, the immigration policy, especially for people of the Caribbean, is very draconian, very restrictive, as against people from the Europe, people from Anglo-Saxon countries, and how the ease with which they travel as against the difficulty with which people of the Caribbean travel. And this issue of ties, I said it's tied to a discriminatory policy created within a system where people who really need to emigrate find it harder to do so vis-a-vis their other countrymen who are more welcome, creating a brain drain for the former colonies of the global South. But this situation is good or beneficial for maintaining power and control. It provides the opportunity that allows post-industrial countries to continue holding the advantage. Holding the advantage after now we're thinking strategically now. When you think about why a decision is, why a policy is the way it's written, and so on and so forth. You start thinking, let's think in terms of strategy. Let's think in terms of the competitive world that we are in and the advantages that some countries have and how those advantages must be maintained, and the policy initiatives that are created to maintain those initiatives, even when we think about immigration, okay? So, of course, we said it provides opportunity that allows post-industrial countries to continue holding the advantage within a highly competitive world. So my question is, the global South countries, we have to think like how China is thinking, think like how Singapore is. Say, for example, China, and I wrote an article, which I will share with you. I will share it in the class today, last week, Friday, talking about, and I will talk about it. So we're going to take a break in a couple of minutes, and when we come back, I'm going to talk about the world of AI, artificial intelligence, and China. And I wrote an article about who rules the world, and it's in the Jamaican Gleaner as letter of the day. I don't know if I'm going to have time to read that, because as we think about where we are in the world and what's happening in the world. By the way, how much cryptocurrency is Jamaica invested? Do we have any crypto? Are we invested in cryptocurrency? Does the Jamaican government or the Caribbean government, do we have money in crypto? Have we invested in crypto, and how much did we lose? I haven't heard. And can I tell you, Jamaica did invest heavily in crypto, but is there any news circulating about what's going on with Jamaica and crypto today? What's going on with that? But let's continue with the discussion. We have to think in terms of strategy. We have to think in terms of competition. We cannot be too heavily dependent on aid, heavily dependent on another country, because we also have to think in terms of competition. And where we find ourselves, we talk about the black position. And I said to you in the new book that I'm writing, which is almost finished, it's being peer reviewed, entitled Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nations, which is a play upon words called PON. PON is a play upon words. Notice Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nations. Adam Smith wrote the book Capitalism and the Wealth of Nations, talking about capitalism and how American society and capitalist society came to be, and how development came to be, okay, which was and so on and so forth. So when I talked about neo-capitalism and the death of nations, secularism, bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. Caribbean people have to think in terms of strategy, have to think in terms of competition. We talk about the black position. The black position is where we find ourselves and where we constantly shoot ourselves in the foot. But the black position is a position where you find ourselves. And I said it in the book, it is as if people of color have lost the race of time. Lost the race of time. And the Caribbean, because we do not think, or probably we now think it, because of strategy has dogged us. A strategy that carve out a future of prosperity and competition has dogged them, has affected us in a sense where if we don't think in those terms. And of course, we believe in the good fortunes of people who provide aid. We believe in that the other people, they are good Samaritans. They are good Samaritans of another pedigree who also want to maintain an advantage in the world. We live in a competitive world. So we have to think competitively. Anyways, but beyond that, the point I'm making here is that it provides the opportunity that allows post-industrial countries the discriminatory practice. It provides an opportunity that allows post-industrial countries to continue holding the advantage within a highly competitive world. And I ask the question, why shouldn't the consequence of brain drain be an effective strategy for any country to hold an advantage? Why shouldn't the consequence of brain drain be an effective strategy for any country to hold an advantage? When the best minds leave a country for another, it weakens one country and strengthens the other, who gain the brain. Therefore, immigration is not an easy fix. I do think, especially as you think about it, especially when it is understood within the politics or geopolitics or politics of international competition, where gains and losses are hinged on the movement of certain people from the global south to the global north, from the global south to the global north.
Sir.
Yes.
So the reason why the brains left their own country to go to another, because even though they have the brains in their country, they're not appreciated or things, because most of them are underpaid.
Yes.
They can't, what they're receiving cannot maintain their lifestyle. So there's things like going to another country to use that opportunity, that brain would be better, because living in Jamaica to go to the US, they will make it more money to survive for them and their family.
Yes.
Because every day now in Jamaica, persons are having strikes, persons because of the whole pay. Even the bus system in Jamaica, the bus system in Jamaica, JTC, they strike because they wanted they had some pay issues. So persons are striking so they're not getting paid enough to do the work that they're doing, sir. So they find other opportunities to leave the country to go somewhere for betterment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, hearing you.
Okay, and that's a good point. Any more point? That's a great point. They'll leave it, but is this? I talk about, we're going to talk some more about this, but we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and where Jamaica and the Caribbean falls in that, guys. So let's take a break. Think about it for a minute. We'll be right back. Okay, guys? Think about where the Caribbean and countries of the global south and people of color, when we come back for this class, okay? We will get into it a little bit. All right? We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back. before I am going to be talking about the social, I will continue to look. I want to spend some time looking at Garveyism, the socio-economic context of Jamaica and the Caribbean, and Caribbean faunanism. But before I do that, I want to just, as I said to you, part of this class is also looking at what's going on in the world today and responding to it. It's not, so we're looking at history and diverse currents. So that is why I want to look at C.L.R James, looking at the issue of cricket and how cricket has evolved. And if you look at how cricket has evolved, then you look at how the issue of race and the issue of class and the issue of the structure of class and the demographics and the racial makeup of the Caribbean has evolved as Caribbean cricket has evolved. You look at even the music. We want to look at Bob Marley and the image of Bob Marley with Michael Manley and Edward Seaga. We want to look at that. We also want to take and of course C.L.R James, who on Haiti and Jacobins, and of course Walter Rodney on the issue of Guyana, and of course American penetration in the Caribbean. That's still that's still an issue. That is still an issue. But we want to pause for a moment, looking at those diverse currents, looking at Frantz Fanon, Homi Baba, so on and so forth, who are also important when you're thinking about diverse currents or figures, but figures who were influenced by other figures. But before we do that, let us contend with this issue of what is going on in the world, the world in transition, because what's going on in the world will really impact us. And I want to ask you a question, and I want to ask a question. In fact, I will create a poll as we get ready for the next class. And the question is, it's about, there is the question. I'm creating a poll. By the way, results for the poll that I had asked, 100% of you. Let's go to the next poll. Here's another poll. And you guys can discuss it among yourselves during the break and while I play this next video talking about the world in transition. And I also wrote another article, Who Rules the World? Okay, which I will, if I have a time to share, I will share it with you. But if you can go and read the article in the Gleaner, I wrote Who Rules the World. You can check that out. But if I have time, I talk about that briefly today. Who rules the world and how, and the implications that have for the Caribbean and the global South countries. Yes? Okay, and that's a very important question. What is the implication? When you talk about the world is in transition. Talk about leadership at the center is softening, but that is not true. It's not that leadership at the center is softening. China and Russia are repositioning themselves to become the next superpower, especially now that we know that they have ditched the US dollar for the cryptocurrency. What does that mean for Jamaica and the Caribbean and the global South? Is it good for the Caribbean and the global South? And so on and so forth. We'll talk about that in a few. But let me ask a poll. Let me go to next. And the question is, what is the greatest challenge to Jamaica, the Caribbean? Jamaica and the Caribbean. Choice 1, AI. Choice 2, China and Russia. Let's add another choice. Choice 3, crypto currency. Choice 4, poverty and relative deprivation. I think that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not sure. Oh. Other. Oh, you know what? I should add another one. I should add one called secularism without inspiration. There we go. Okay, guys, I have a poll for you. And the question is, what is the greatest challenge? Or the greatest challenge? What is the greatest threat to Jamaica and the Caribbean? What's the greatest threat to, well, it's really the greatest threat to humanity. The greatest threat to humanity. But since we're in Caribbean thought class, let me make it more relevant. What is the greatest threat, the greatest challenge to Jamaica and the Caribbean? Is it A, artificial intelligence, B, China and Russia, C, cryptocurrency, B, poverty and relative deprivation, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And I am going to, okay, the title of this poll is Greatest Threat to Humanity. And then let's save this. And I am about to publish the poll, guys. Greatest threat to humanity. It is launched. Greatest threat to humanity. What is the greatest challenge to Jamaica and the Caribbean? A, is it artificial intelligence? B, China and Russia. C, cryptocurrency. D, poverty and relative deprivation. C, other, or D, secularism without inspiration. I'm going to share my screen. Share. There we go. I think you are seeing the screen now. Let me share the sound. I'm going to share the sound. Share sound. Okay, while you are thinking about this question and answering it, get ready to talk about it briefly. Because at 9 o'clock, I want to start looking at this, picking up from where we left off at the last class, looking at the socio-economic context of Jamaica and the Caribbean, Caribbean fananism and Garveyism, the limitations of Garveyism, okay? And resistance movement and civil rights, so on and so forth. So look at that question briefly, guys, and while that is happening, listen to this. We are at a pivotal moment in the world. At a time when we are questioning the need for currency, China, Brazil, and several other countries are seeking to replace the US dollar with crypto. Artificial intelligence is becoming normal talk in everyday language as society becomes more sophisticated, thanks to advances in technology. I am Renaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Podcast. This episode is entitled The World in Transition, China, Artificial Intelligence, and Crypto. Are you guys hearing the video? Are you guys? Hello?
No, sir.
I am playing a YouTube. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
But you're not hearing. Are you hearing the? Are you hearing it?
I play, sir. Let me see if I can hear it.
Intelligence, AI.
It's but it's slow.
It's
but
low.
I'm hearing it.
Lot of sounds. Okay, hold on.
Yes, sir. But I'm hearing it, sir.
All right, let me turn it up. Maybe you check your volume to see, but let me see. It says share sound is on. Tell me if you're hearing it now. Kids, is no longer a piece of fiction.
Yes, sir.
But rather commonplace in people's daily lives, whether they realize it or not. That's according to Berger Thomason of Statista.com in an article entitled Artificial Intelligence Worldwide, Statistics and Facts. As society becomes more sophisticated, thanks to advances in technology. I am Renaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Podcast. This episode is entitled The World in Transition, China, Artificial Intelligence, and Crypto. Artificial intelligence, AI, once the subject of people's imaginations and the main plot of science fiction movies for decades, is no longer a piece of fiction, but rather commonplace in people's daily lives, whether they realize it or not. That's according to Berger Thomason of Statista.com in an article entitled Artificial Intelligence Worldwide, Statistics and Facts. Now, AI refers to the ability of a computer or machine to mimic the competencies of the human mind, which often learns from previous experiences to understand and respond to language, decisions, and problems. According to Mr. Thormodson in the article, these AI capabilities, such as computer vision and conversational interfaces, have become embedded throughout various industries, standard business process. Now, the most prominent industries for AI adoption in organizations include high-tech and telecommunications, financial services, and healthcare and pharmaceuticals. You can see an article I wrote entitled Challenges to Humanity, China, Cryptocurrency, Russia, and Artificial Intelligence in the Neoliberal Corporation's More magazine yesterday. Now, a major part of real-world AI has to be solved to make unsupervised, generalized, full self-driving work, as the entire road system is designed for biological neural nets with optical images. Now, that's according to a tweet from Musk University on Twitter. Now, I responded by saying, agreed. What will we do with the rideshare drivers who will be out of work once AI becomes fully functional in self-driving cars? Not only are we to think about the road systems, but also the human being. The more we develop robotics, human work becomes unnecessary, which affects earning potential. Unless we come up with another mechanism to base earnings, or we will live in a welfare consumer world. Elon Musk responded saying, and Tesla is getting it done. He was actually responding to Mr. Musk University, not to what I had said. Now, in response to Mr. Musk, I said, but who is working on the human and the loss of work? Who is working on revolutionizing human compensation that is tied to productivity and activity, which will become redundant to machines? For every skill or job, AI will eventually replace. So what's next and what gives? You listen to this podcast, you can participate, and we also poses the greatest threat to humanity. Which of these poses the greatest threat to humanity? 1, artificial intelligence, AI. A, artificial intelligence, AI. B, Russia and China. C, cryptocurrency. Or D, World War III.
I did not add World War III, guys. I should have added World War III. That's fine.
That you can participating on the community page of this podcast. The question is, where is AI headed? Where is AI headed or heading? You can participate. We will also probably create opportunities for those who don't listen on Spotify or if you listen on other platforms such as iHeartRadio or Amazon Music or Apple PA Adverb or Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, so on and so forth, Podvine, whichever one you listen to. We will make it. We will probably. You could actually go to the to Twitter, Renaldo McKenzie, RENALDO MCKENZIE, Renaldo McKenzie.
Let's forward this
with human relations and production, and created an economic CI. Since we moved away from the barter or exchange, artificial intelligence poses serious threats to humanity. And to fix the challenge, we may have to revolutionize human systems today. This society was never built to facilitate AI. Since we moved away from the barter or exchange system to currency, which helped to maintain and extend privilege and power in the development of human civilization,
The invention of
Say pause if you're not hearing it.
currency was revolutionary in the development of human civilization. Barter or exchange system to currency, which helped to maintain, was never built to facilitate AI. Today, this society was never built to facilitate AI. Since we moved away from the barter or exchange system to currency, which helped to maintain and extend privilege and power in the development of human civilization. The invention of currency was revolutionary, as it completely replaced the dynamic of human relations and production and created an economic system of value that resolved unfair exchanges in the barter system. Moreover, the need for a currency system in its conception was necessary to facilitate a rapidly expanding world that was developing sophistication and science in work, leading to the various revolutions, agrarian, industrial. As the world sped towards becoming industrial, moving from agrarian to the industrial, so on and so forth, currency may have been proven useful. But with the explosion of technology and its capabilities through AI, we are faced with another problem. How does the working class obtain it without the possibility of work? To answer this question critically may lead us. How does the working class obtain work? How does the working class obtain work without the possibility of work? Given rapid expansion in artificial intelligence, this class, the reason why I decided to, I wasn't going to share this. This wasn't supposed to be the topic for today, but the reason why I decided to share this with you today, because we only have about 2 more classes after this. And I really need to, and I want us to also think about what's happening not only today, but what will happen in the future. And since we are scholars, young academics, young scholars, I'm with you. We are young academics in Caribbean thought, yes, contributing to academia, contributing to thought, because this course is not just also to learn. This course is not only to dissect or to critique, okay? We're not only skeptics from the looking at history of all things from a subaltern view, history from below, okay? But we must also look at what opportunities are there once we have learned about what has affected us and where we are today and why we are today. We don't want to make the same mistakes, yes? So we also want to start thinking about the future, because guess what? We don't want life to escape us, because the reality is that life is happening quite rapidly. While we are grappling and dealing with who and what we are today as a result of where we are coming from, life is happening and it's moving quickly. And we're moving into the future. What is the Caribbean today? What? Okay. And it's diaspora or people of color. When we talk about in terms of machines and technology, I wrote an article, my first article that I ever wrote, which was in the Jamaica Guyana. And it was about, no, actually it was my second article. The first article dealt with an issue of ethics. The second article that I ever wrote in the Jamaica Queen as a letter of the day. I said in the letter, and I rewrote that into an updated document, saying that the key is science and technology. Science and technology. But can I tell you, I think I'm going to change that. I'm going to update it. And actually, I did an article recently talking about love, talking about what there is no marriage between secularism and inspiration. Talked about that a little bit. But anyways, but as people, we have to, what opportunities are there for us to reinvent ourselves? We have to always think constructively. When we think about, when we critique, I said, I'm always saying to us, we have to think about it in a constructive way. Constructively, when we critique, we also must explore opportunities to make the thing better. Okay, so we have to also start thinking about artificial intelligence, where we are in terms of the shift, the changing dominance in the world as China and Russia reposition themselves. What does that mean for the Caribbean? What we know that China has been investing heavily in middle and developing countries over the past 10-20 years. And I know that Jamaica and the Caribbean is part of that investment and has been benefiting significantly from Chinese investment. And of course, we talk about the US. US has also been saying that Russia and China and these other countries have been, in a sense, trying to attack not only the US, but US allies. Is Jamaica a US ally? What does that look like? What does that mean? The Caribbean. Okay, those are very important questions that we have to consider for this class and for ourselves as people. Let us continue. So the question is, as we think about immigration now, and we just talked about immigration, and as we talk and we listen to Pam's story, and we listen to Chantel's contribution to the class today, as she introduced a topic dealing with what's going on in terms of Mexico, US border, and how Jamaica and the Caribbean is part of that. Okay, part of that experience, because now, because of the pressure, because of the policy, the immigration policy since 2018, and the difficult, and Jamaica, it has always been difficult for people of color and people of the global south to travel to first world countries. Okay, there has always been a policy that makes it very difficult for poor people and people of certain pedigree to travel to first world countries, of course, because they're saying, well, we have our own problems, and so that has always been the case. But then there's always a pushback on that when immigration, when people from other countries, especially from the global south, they come with an attitude to work, and so on and so forth. But outside of that, as we think about people are now traveling for opportunity, traveling to be paid, traveling, the issue. But I say to you, the currency poses a problem for humanity. The day when we invented currency was the death of humanity. Because as I said, as you will hear in the article, I make that argument. But people are traveling for opportunity. But of course, we find that we're hearing that the US dollar is weakening. How will that affect Jamaica and the Caribbean? The fact that China and Russia and other countries is ditching the crypto, the US for the crypto. What does that mean in terms of currency and valuations, and how will that change the dynamic and the talk, and how are we repositioning ourselves to take advantage of the changing and so on, the changes that seem to be occurring in the world? But okay, so those are some questions that I'm throwing out to you to just start thinking about in your own lives and as academics. Okay, let's continue with the discussions here. We will wrap up this particular video in about 10 minutes. To several probabilities that are not possible. Several probabilities. Now it's very important that you listen to the tape here, the video. Okay. To answer this question critically may lead us to several probabilities that are not possible. Several probabilities that are not possible. And that this is a deep point. Listen to what I'm saying here. Listen to the point I'm saying here. I said The need for a currency system in its conception was necessary to facilitate a rapidly expanding world that was developing sophistication and science in work, leading to the various revolutions, agrarian and industrial. As the world sped towards becoming industrial, moving from the agrarian to the industrial, currency may have been proven useful. But with the explosion of technology and its capabilities through AI, we are faced with another problem. How does the working class obtain money, currency, without the possibility of work? And I said to answer this question critically may lead us to several probabilities that are not possible. This is a deep point that we will flesh out later. And when I say later, I mean we will flesh this out later. But ultimately, we may have to get rid of money or currency if we are to push this, the possibilities to its logical end. We may have to get rid of money or currency. We talk about neoliberal globalization, reconsidered neo-capitalism, and the death of nations. This is exactly what we're talking about. Because the dialectic of whether we live to work or work to live becomes whether we live to consume and consume to live. As technology replaces the working class work, and therefore their ability to consume and essentially to live in the new consumer society today and worse tomorrow. Social welfare will not be enough. We won't have enough work for the working class, especially with population growth and explosion and limited resources. We talk about economics, study how to distribute limited resources that are limited amongst wants and needs that are unlimited. And with the possibility of global war, and with the threat of global warming, and the fact and how that is affecting food supply today. Food supply. The issue of currency and money and AI is a very ominous outlook on life. The dialectic of whether we live to work or work to live becomes whether we live to consume and consume to live, as technology replaces the working class work, and therefore their ability to consume and essentially to live in the new consumer society today and worse tomorrow. Social welfare will not be enough to deal with the loss of human labor, and thus any currency they can obtain in order to consume and live. Already, politicians politicize social programs and are busy mopping up liquidity. If you want to see how technology can upend lives and society, just visit Kensington, Philadelphia. It is unlike any place you will notice in a first world country. Deindustrialization, which is the first step in the sophistication that robotics is imposing on human life. The first casualty, the first step, deindustrialization, has affected the lives of those whom society has now rendered obsolete through technology replacement that has left many dependent on opioids for escape. Further, China, Brazil, and several other countries today are ditching the US dollar for cryptocurrency. That was always the plan though, but the US caught wind of it and made a wise chess move to dismantle Bitcoin, which was investing in crypto, and Silicon Valley Bank. And Silicon Valley Bank collapsed as the Chinese and the US rivals were investing in crypto and through social media promoted crypto. Now, many Americans New investors with no sound knowledge of geopolitics and Wall Street started using their stimulus money and hard-earned savings to invest in crypto and Bitcoin. Crypto was booming. The Chinese, Brazil, Russia, India, and some other countries were hoping to weaken the US by replacing the demand and dominance of the US dollar, and was even getting the support of people in the US. Little did they know how crypto was the currency that was supposed to upend the US dollar as the main and a major exchange currency, the major exchanged currency in the world. But the US acted, mopping up liquidity, cutting social programs, slowing aid, etc., limiting Americans with excess cash to invest in crypto and forcing them back to work after COVID. Bitcoin and crypto collapsed and several businesses were called before the US Capitol. Many investment businesses closed and the currency plunged. Yet China, Brazil, and others are still proposing a move to replace the US dollar as their main exchange for the crypto. Furthermore, China has been, which may be a foolhardy position, but furthermore, China has been lending monies to not just low-income countries, but middle-income countries such as Argentina, Turkey, and so on. Now, it is hard to imagine that borrower countries may now have to use the cryptocurrency to repay these loans and to trade with China and other currencies, ditching the US dollar. However, the US dollar remains the strongest, most backed and reputable currency in the world. Nevertheless, at a time when we are questioning the need for currency, China, Brazil, and several other countries are seeking to replace the US dollar with crypto. I will stop here. I will stop the video. You can watch that, the rest of it, because the rest of it provides more data about artificial intelligence and what's going on with artificial intelligence in the world. You can listen to that or read it in the Neoliberal or RenaldoMcKenzie.com, whatever the case might be. But notice I talk about a dialectic. The dialectic of whether we live to work or work to live changes to whether we consume to live or live to consume as we become a consumer society. And if we become a consumer society driven by technology without the possibility of work and therefore the possibility of money, then the question is, how will people live then? Will we now become if we are a consumer society, then how are we going to become a welfare society? But then one of the stages of development in a capitalist society or capitalist economy is, of course, welfare. One of the hallmarks of capitalist societies is that they are a society that is also dependent on welfare. But in many Caribbean islands and global south countries, there is no welfare that is driven by government or by the state. Okay, of course, Barbados has a welfare system. They have a much more developed and elaborate welfare system as against Jamaica, which the welfare system is not as developed, of course, because of lack of government funding or limited funding to be able to do that. But as Jamaica moves towards sophistication and development, of course, one of the things that Jamaica will have to now start thinking about is its welfare program and so on and so forth. Because that is one of the ways you will be able to strengthen your economy and strengthen your country. Okay, because you have to invest in your people. Okay, you invest in your people. And one of the ways you invest in people is through education. You make them competitive. China made, and I think I talked about this in the video earlier, how China has made a market. China has a market now, where their people can buy, and they are buying. Okay, and the US is taking advantage of that. And so because China has a market that is controlled by the state, a market that involves human consumers who are human beings, and human beings have what is known as there's human behavior, and certain factors control human behavior. And of course, in a planned economy like China, they control consumer behavior, human behavior. And so therefore, if America's bottom line, which is profit or money, and America is ruled and driven by corporations, and according to Ross Perot, Organizing America, the most dominant feature in American life is corporations and their multinationals and transnationals, which penetrate, which is not just in America, but is in almost which has penetrated societies across the region and the world. If those were the dominant feature, and of course William Dumhoff talked about what's the most, and I said that before in this class, William Dumhoff in his book Who Rules America, it's the corporations or the dominant class, according to Dale Johnson in his book about governance, talking about the dominant class. I mean, I think in a previous class when I talked about neoliberalism, I defined the dominant class. Probably I will share that some later on again if you want to hear who the dominant class, financiers and the Wall Street and corporations and so on and so forth. But the point here is that, and I think I went off on a tangent. I usually take so long to make my point that the point escaped me as I go around the bush to come to the point I'm making. But but if I could, I was talking about China and Russia being the dominant and the welfare state. So China now has, so they dominate. So talking about who rules the world. So we're saying that China is setting the stage to rule because they control human behavior. They control their consumers. They have a market now where their people are consuming goods. And so America recognized that, and they realized corporations are racing to get the market, to be able to dominate the market in terms of with their goods and services, and with the Chinese consumers now. They have a market. But of course, just so you know, one of the things about China is that they have invested in their people. And of course, in the Caribbean, we talk about democratic socialism, but part of democratic socialism is creating a welfare program or state that empowers your people and bring them to a point where they are so competitive. Now they can compete with the rest in the world. Now they don't have to be traveling illegally, okay, and suffering the wrath of mistreatment. Because just so you know, again, I say to you, we are in a competitive world. We're in a competitive world. So of course, we cannot expect another country to be a little bit soft and less draconian with their immigration system. When you think about what they are trying to achieve in the world, and where certain countries and the global south countries are in between. And I said to you, what has mitigated and minimized our Caribbean and global south prosperity is an inability to come together. And when we were discussing independence in the 50s, Jamaica and some other countries went outside of that because they wanted this nationalist pride, this pride of just running your own country after being run by another country. But I mean, it's good arguments there, but there are also arguments that is devoid of the future. But of course, part of the discussion is we have to start thinking about developing the welfare programs. But a welfare state is a state that is developed and established enough to be able to take care of their people. But there are those who, irrespective of their inability to take care of their people, they are able to make the sacrifices to ensure that they have invested in their people, such as Cuba. Okay? Cuba, irrespective of the embargoes, they have done so. And so probably that's one of the things that we have to start thinking about in terms of, and Barbados, creating a welfare program, a welfare system in Jamaica. Is that doable? Is that possible? Okay. And of course, the kind of society Jamaica is in terms of, we have a bucolic society, a tropical society. So in some societies, welfare programs are necessary. But of course, Jamaica, which probably can we don't have winters and so on and so forth. We have to develop the agrarian, develop the agriculture. So we have to now start thinking about, we have to go back to the olden days, thinking about living, thinking about feeding, thinking about food supply, and developing Jamaica's ability to be able to mass produce agriculturally, to feed Jamaica themselves as we think about the future and what the future looks like without the possibility of money. Okay? And the fact that global warming also poses a threat to the world and to what? Food supply. Okay? All right, so I will stop right there as it relates to that, in terms of looking at the world in transition and what that means for the Caribbean, in terms of what kind of society will we have in the Caribbean in the next 10 years, next 5 years, as we think about the sophistication that's driving the world. That's something for you guys to think about as well. Okay? All right, so we're going to pause right there, and now we can go into what I had initially intended that we wanted to do. So what we will do, we will take a 5 minutes break, and then at 9 o'clock we'll come back, and then when we come back at 9 o'clock, what we will do is, if I could bring that up, close that out. Is this the document?
It'll what time? I hear.
It's about to be 9, but okay. It's sorry about that. Yes. What time is it there again? 8 o'clock.
8. It's gonna be 8, yes, sir.
All right, good. So and I think I am running on good time today. So that's great. I am about to share the poll in a couple minutes, but I am trying to find a document. Oh, I have Chantel's name right here. I need to look for Katie. Bring up that document here. Cover design, interior, and add blah 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 blah. There we go. Wow. There we go. All right, when we come back, we will lift up some of the concepts as it relates to Caribbean thought, as I had written in Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty, and Resistance. Just so you know, when I wrote that book, Neoliberalism, I was working with an hypothesis, and the hypothesis was entitled, and the part A of neoliberalism has the hypothesis. It was a response to that hypothesis. Was a research paper speaking to that hypothesis, looking at neoliberal restructuring, income inequality, poverty in Jamaica from the mid-1970s and beyond. So when we come back, which in about 3 minutes, the hypothesis is this: if neoliberalizing economic structures create inequity and poverty, then income inequality and poverty should trend upward in Jamaica from the mid-1970s to 2008 and to the present. Again, the hypothesis for part A of neoliberalism, globalization, income inequality, poverty, and resistance, the hypothesis was this: if neoliberalizing means to liberate, if liberalizing economic structures create inequity and poverty, then income inequality and poverty should trend upward in Jamaica from the mid-1970s to 2008 and to the present. And it is while embarking on that research that I introduced in the book the socio-economic context of not just Jamaica, but also the Caribbean. And from that, talk about the limitations of Garveyism, because I said to you, the independence that we have, the independence that Caribbean countries have, is a facade. I said to you, I make the point, I make this argument that if your independence and if your freedom is ceremonially granted to you, but okay, it means then that your freedom is not an inalienable right. If your freedom has to be arranged, in other words, if one person, if another man, another human being gives another human being, yes, freedom. First of all, no man should give another man freedom, and no man should give another man independence. I am I am free like any other man. If another man gives me that right of freedom, it means then that I am forever beholden to that man. In other words, that man becomes God. That man has the right to grant, a man that has the right to grant freedoms and independence, yes, is still a most powerful man over that man that has received it. Okay, first of all, no man should have to receive a paper indicating his independence and his freedom from any other man. Yes? And so I say to you, I have said in this book, and I have argued in my dissertation, that when we think about freedom, when we think about power, this is an issue of power. Okay, when we talk about Caribbean thought, and we have to appropriate freedom, and we have to appropriate independence appropriately. Yes? So I say to you, what freedom is freedom if it is given, if it is granted? If it is granted. And of course, you talk about Muhammad Ali talk about the Black Panthers movement, and that's part of the argument as well. Okay. You talk about, when you compare Marcus Garvey helped to influence the civil rights movement here in America. But when you compare that MLK, okay, as against those of the Black Panther movement and so on and so forth, that was the sticking point. Why should I have to have a ceremonial arrangement, okay, to guarantee my freedom? It puts this thing into perspective. Yes. So in the book I talk about the whole this issue of Caribbean people and people of color and people who are formerly colonized, who did not fight for their independence. Well, yes, they fought for it, but eventually settled by sitting in a room and having a man signing over a paper and saying, "Hey, you're free." That means if you have a paper that grants you your right, then that paper can be easily removed. You can throw away that paper. Your freedom is only hinged on that piece of paper, not in the fact that you are a human being. Yes? So of course I talk about that, the limitations of Garveyism, the limitations of the resistance movement, and whether or not people are truly independent and whether or not people are truly free. And when you see the de jure factor or the de facto factors in society of systemic racism and discrimination, not just within a particular country, but internationally and globally, when thinking about the Black position, yes, then of course it continues today because of how freedoms are received and granted. But we'll talk about, so we'll probably lift up that real quickly and end by looking at Caribbean Fanonism, because that is exactly what that Fanon was talking about. When he talked about the Negro is not any more than the white man. So that the Negro must now be granted freedoms. I look at freedom as a gift and not a right. Okay? And we will end with that in class today. And then next week, of course, I will share with you, and I think Chantel may have done that before, but there are the essays I referenced today, C.L.R. James on Haiti and on cricket, the evolution of cricket, looking at Guyana, Walter Rodney, and of course, looking at Bob Marley, and who shot the sheriff. That's the next class, we will do that. And then of course, the final class, we will wrap up looking at the expression of thought, the expression of this thought, and so on, and what opportunities are there to invent ourselves. We're going to end on a high note, on hope. But okay.
Sir.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
I am hearing you.
Here, right. So, sir, when are we going to have like a revision class to prepare us for the exam?
You need a revision class. I tell you what, let me see how many people are in the class today. Only 13 people are in the class. So, okay, fine. I'm going to make the announcement now. But as of next week, we will have the final hour. Whatever I am teaching in the class, please allow me. I need to wrap it up at we start at 7, 6, 7 at 7:30, which is 8:30 my time next week. Remind me that I will need to stop what I'm doing so that we could now review so that we can review the exam topics for the exam. Okay. So next week from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, we will review the topics for the exam. Okay. In fact, part of that review involves I will come with a pop quiz for class next week, and we will have a discussion about, and I'll see how you do. I'll give you 30 minutes to do the quiz.
Yes, sir. That sounds good.
We'll do that. I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Chantel works for me. Remind me about this. We'll work on it together. I'll give you a 30 minutes pop quiz. Then we will look at the answers together. We will see how you guys answered the question. Okay. And then and the pop quiz is gonna be real. It's gonna be actually a mock of the exam. So if you do well on the pop quiz, then that's fine. Everything that we discuss in the last hour and a half of class next week will be geared towards the exam and what you can expect in the exam. So of course, I expect to see persons, and we will not record that class because I want people to come to that class. Okay, that class will not be recorded because I want people to come to the class. All right. So I won't record that class. So maybe I record it, but I won't publish it until after the exam. Okay. All right. So give us 2 minutes break. Okay. Time is upon us. So, and I like when you guys take breaks. So 5 minutes break. We come back at 9:10. And when we come back at 9:10, I am going to share from, I will begin by saying this. From 1980 to 2008, the Jamaican government acquiesced to the bureaucratic phenomenon of the neoliberals. The Jamaican government followed structural adjustment policies called SAPs that attempted to transform its small political economy from social democracy and distribution equity in the 1970s. That's the economy they have. They had what is known as distributional equity in the 1970s to dependent capitalism in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, today, Jamaica is a middle-income, developing country with a capitalist economy centered around a culture of servitude where tourism, hospitality, sports, and music are the main sources of income for most Jamaicans. And not just Jamaica, but for the Caribbean and the global South. In fact, many turn to crime. And we say that Jamaica has this, and by the way, crime was usually just a Jamaican thing. Almost all Caribbean islands are having to deal with that. Probably, let's say maybe St. Kitts and Nevis and Bermuda and so on and so forth. But more so in Trinidad and the more prominent Caribbean islands. Of course, Haiti and so on and so forth. But many turn to crime. Jamaica had at one time, and when I wrote this book, Jamaica had the second highest violent crime rate in the world, with a violent crime rate index of 57. And I got that from the World Population Review's ranking. And corruption is rampant. And we talked about corruption already. The local manufacturing industry was destroyed or supplanted by international penetration of capitalist regimes facilitated by neoliberal globalization. In 2010, the island's HDI. What is HDI? HDI. The HDI is the Human Development Index. HDI is the human, and earlier I talked about China investing in its people, in their education. I said to you, that's going to be the death of the US. They are so concerned with discriminatory tactics, okay, withholding money from investing in people to make their people so competitive in the world because they want to promote inequality and so on. China, when you look at the educational levels and capabilities of these people, and you look at the kind of economy they have, and you look at the HDI, the Human Development Index. So I said in 2010, the island, Jamaica, Human Development Index ranking improved from middle to high. From middle to high. And that was not just for Jamaica. A lot of the Caribbean countries mirror that same development, but except that especially Barbados, And for some reason, Barbados, again, I keep referencing Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. And by the way, I did a comparative study looking at Barbados and other Caribbean countries and Jamaica, which I hope I have time to talk about that in the beginning of the next class. But I talk about that in this book, comparing the Caribbean islands economically, looking at their socioeconomics. But in 2010, Jamaica's and the Caribbean per se, HDI, Human Development Ranking, improved from middle to high. Still, in Jamaica, at the time, in about 2021, or during COVID, the poverty was at 16.5%. Poverty, 16.5% of Jamaicans lived in poverty, and increased from 9.9%, an increase from 9.9% in 2007. And so therefore, please remember what is my hypothesis? What is my hypothesis? My hypothesis is that if opening up economic structures create inequity and poverty, then income inequity and poverty should trend upward. There should be more poverty, more income inequality. Because if I am asserting that neoliberal policies within societies creates more problems in terms of create more income inequality. So therefore, that is what we should expect, because that is exactly what happened in Jamaica and the Caribbean from the mid-1970s and beyond, an implantation of neoliberal strategies through the IMF and the World Bank, giving loans and attaching conditionalities which deepen the realities of these peoples. Yes? So therefore, I am saying, as we talk about the HDI, the Human Development Index, and poverty. So we said that poverty is set to rise in Jamaica in 2020, given the pandemic, and not just in Jamaica, in the world. Okay, poverty is set, given the pandemic and the economic setbacks it has created for many. On the other hand, based on the World Bank's figures, it might be better to say that most Jamaicans live in poverty, as the average gross national income, the GNI, gross national income is GNI, per capita of the population. When you measure anything, when you measure society or any variable, you always talk about per capita of the population. And that's how you make comparisons. Say, for example, you said, okay, of course, the US have more violence than Jamaica. But when you look at it in terms of the totality, but you have to look at it in terms of per capita, per 100 of the population. That's how you measure. So you look at per 100 or per 1,000. Across countries, per 100 and per 1,000, within a socio-economic region, or whatever the case might be. So this is important to say that when we look about Jamaica and the gross national income per capita of the population of Jamaica, it is at $4,990 US. $4,990 US. That's the gross national per year. Okay, per year. And when you look at the gross national income per capita of the population of Jamaica, and you compare it with the gross national income per capita of the population of countries of the US, it's almost mirror what the gross national income per capita of the population of people from vulnerable communities, colored communities. So I talk about the black position. When you have a concentration of a high amount of colored people within a particular region, then when you compare the gross national income across, okay. And by the way, I did an injustice with my book. I made a comparison when you look at the gross national income of Jamaica per capita, Jamaicans, let's say on average $5,000 US per year, as against a community of color or African Americans in first world countries, and how much they earn per year. It's a little bit more, but it's almost okay. But it's a little bit more. But a lot of these communities are heavily dependent on social welfare because of the economic realities and how the society is structured, which is how societies are structured in the Caribbean, especially on the global stage. In essence, most Jamaicans earn a gross income of $13.67 per day, US. You can multiply that by what? $137. I don't know what But recently I learned that the Jamaican dollar was gaining against the US dollar. So I don't know what it is now as of today. But a couple of weeks ago when I checked it, I mean, some time ago it was 147 and it was 137 at once. Don't know what it is now. But Jamaica ranks 165th worldwide with a growth rate of 0.46%. And I actually have in fact, I think I can share my screen with you so you can see. Let me just see if I could find this. So you can see this. And I'm going to share my screen. And I am sharing the screen. There we go. And in fact, let me move this out the way. And this is actually from my book, Neoliberalism, page 5. And if you look at Jamaica's growth rate from the 1960s, you look, guys, are you seeing Jamaica's growth rate from the 1960s?
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing it? What does that look like? And by the way, something happened between the 1980s and the 1990s. Between 1980 and the 1990s, that year, Jamaica and some Caribbean countries had a rapid decline in terms of their growth rate. The growth, at one time, and I said to you some time ago in the last class, Jamaica's growth rate was at 5.8%. That's high. And you look at between 1980, you look at this figure here, and 1990, look at the growth rate. What happened? What happened in the 1980s? Heavy implantation of neoliberal policies. Who was prime minister in the 1980s? Edward Seaga, who embraced Reaganomics. Yes, trickle-down economics, I think. But look at this. Quite interesting. This is quite interesting, guys. Oops. Let me just move this. Okay, move that over there. All right, so anyways, I said to you that Jamaica is ranked 165th worldwide with a growth rate of 0.4%. And just so you know, it fluctuates. When I was some time ago, every time I checked the stats for Jamaica, the prediction is always, they cannot give it, the prediction is always one that is not stable. The growth, it fluctuates up and down, but it's never stable. In order for a country to really grow and to develop, you have to have stability in your growth. Jamaica is ranked 165th because globalization, according to and I'm using Sub-Commander Marcos at the Intercontinental Encounter in Chiapas. He said, globalization in 1986, globalization has created one big mall where the right can buy children, immigrants, or even a whole country like Jamaica cheaply, thereby exploiting their labor, stealing their profits, and diminishing their way of life. And I say to you, Keynesian economics provided the theoretical and the political foundation for Jamaica and the Caribbean as welfare states. And I don't know if you guys know about Keynes. If you study economics, you might have heard Keynes or principle of business. Keynesian economics was a central insight in demonstrating how national income was predicted upon a perception of investment and demand that had a multiplier effect. I won't get into that. That goes into deep economic arguments, so on and so forth. But I won't get into that. We can have another argument about that. I get into deep arguments that Middle Caribbean thought 400, talking about some deeper issues: consumption ratios, interest rates, investments, expenditure, all those issues. Keynesian economics look to motivation such as foresight, short-sightedness, ostentation, extravagance, which involved empirical investigation of consumption, income ratios, interest rates, investment. And David Keynes believed that in automatic growth. Automatic growth means full employment, even when an economy is in a state of equilibrium and perfect competition. But I won't have time to argue that because I won't have time. This is probably we're gonna have to spend some time to talk about this for another class. But I wanted to just let you know that it's Keynes. If you want to look at the economic situation where we find ourselves and the global policies, you have to look at Keynes, John Maynard Keynes and his policies. So we wanted, now last week we had started looking at chapter 3 of the book, looking at the socio-economic context of Jamaica, a brief overview of Jamaica's socio-economic context. And I said that Jamaica was stratified along racial and class lines stemming from the plantation system, and that Jamaica became a colony of Britain in 1655 after Britain successfully defeated Spain. And notice the correction here, guys. The book Neoliberalism has been edited. We have fixed all the date errors. But in 1655, after Britain successfully defeated Spain, which profited from and controlled the island's wealth for a century, Christopher Columbus opened Jamaica and the Caribbean, or the English-speaking Caribbean, or the Americas, to the global trading map in 1492 when he landed accidentally, or I say buck up, on an inhabited West Indian island. And last week we started having a conversation about this in terms of legally, why people say that he discovered instead of captured. But we believe in this class, and we say in this class, Christopher Columbus did not discover anything. He captured it, yes? But this was the advent of colonial capitalism, where European colonists exploited the native Taíno people's labor, abused their women, and annihilated their race in Jamaica. The Taíno Indians, which is a subgroup of the Arawakan Indians, a group of American Indians in northwestern South America, inhabited the Indians in northeastern South America. They inhabited the Greater Antilles, comprising Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Haiti, and Dominican Republic. Okay? Again, the Taíno Indians, which is a subgroup of the Arawakan Indians, a group of American Indians in northeastern South America. They inhabited the Greater Antilles. The Greater Antilles, and the last class we looked at the Caribbean, and we talk about the Greater Antilles, the Lesser Antilles, and so on and so forth. So the Greater Antilles was inhabited, and what is the Greater Antilles of the Caribbean? We talk about Cuba, Jamaica, Dominican Republic or Hispaniola. What we talk Hispaniola is Haiti and Dominican Republic, and of course, and Puerto Rico, which is not part of the Greater Antilles, but they are part, in a sense, could be considered part of the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean Sea. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World, they were there. Now, under Spanish rule, Jamaica was unprofitable, and a lot of the Caribbean islands where Christopher Columbus had taken control of, they were unprofitable under Spanish rule. Now, Jamaica was unprofitable as a few Spaniards settled on the island who did not find much use for the island. They didn't find much use. There was no gold. And one of the questions I ask is, what was the motive? Why did Christopher Columbus travel? The facade, the lie was that, to spread religion. That's what you are told. But no, it wasn't to spread religion. Yes, it was to find gold. They were racing with the other European countries against time, trying to find gold, heading to East India, landed in West Indies. Yes, buck upon these countries. Yes? Now, so this is important, class. This is important, what I'm talking about right here. I said to you that Jamaica was unprofitable as a few Spaniards settled on the island who did not find much use for the island except to serve the Spanish crown. And I have a grammatical error, to serve, but it's supposed to be to serve, and I'm seeing to served. Wow. The Spanish crown. Many as the Spanish crown, and they served it, it was mainly as a supply base, And that's important. Now, food, men, arms, and horses were shipped to Jamaica as a means to conquer the American mainland. There was much internal conflicts between the local government in Jamaica, who were not getting much support from Spain, who did not value Jamaica as a lucrative trading post without any gold or wealth to drain. And of course, the church was a sore issue. Now, pirate attacks were common in the Caribbean. And as a result, the Spanish hold on the island, the Spanish hold on the island was weakened. And on May 10th, 1655, the English under who? The English. This is going to be on the exam. On May 10th, 1655, the English under Admiral William Penn and General Robert Venables invaded Jamaica and led a successful attack against the Spanish. The Spanish settlers who surrendered, this is important, freed their slaves and then fled to Cuba. So some of the Spaniards who were living in Jamaica, what did they do? They freed their slaves after it was quite certain that the Spanish had invaded, the English had invaded and they're going to take over Jamaica. They fled to Cuba and they relieved whatever slaves that they had. And just so you know, the slavery wasn't elaborate at the time, so they had just a small amount of slaves. They freed the slaves. So when the British came to the Caribbean in 1655 to take over Jamaica and other West Indian countries, there were slaves here, but the slaves were freed. They were freed and they fled to the mountains and they became who? The Maroons. Talk about Nanny of the Maroons, yes? Now, these freed slaves fled to Jamaica mountainside and established small independent colonies and communities that led successful revolts against the British, who eventually abandoned their efforts to re-enslave these Spanish freed slaves known as the Maroons. The English would then concern themselves with slave trade with Africa, which became a popular and profitable venture, coupled with the need for cheap labor and the race to supply a rapidly growing demand for sugar. Now, sugar was king. I noticed I said a rapidly growing demand for sugar. So as the demand for something expands, then of course there's a need for supply, and the supply, of course, and there's a need to cash in on that supply. Okay, on that demand. So sugar was king, and the elites of the British crown, unlike the Spanish, saw an opportunity to benefit from Jamaica. Now, the sugar industry grew so rapidly that 57 sugar estates in the island in 1673 grew to nearly 430 by 1739. The elites of the various major crowns, France, Spain, England, Portugal, competed amongst themselves to monopolize, to control, to take over sugar, so as to gain supernormal profits. But in doing so, they destroyed peoples and places under the facade of religion. Now, Jamaica, under the facade of religion. Now, slave labor traded from Africa was brought to Jamaica and the Caribbean and the New World, the Americas, in inhumane conditions to work on the sugar plantations. Slaves were considered dirty, pretty things who weren't even considered members of any class. They, through reproduction, came to outnumber the white European population on the island. And I'm not going to talk about the plantation society because we touched on it a little bit. Now, constant revolts and rebellion in Jamaica by local leaders and the maroon groups of Black peoples fighting for freedom helped to secure the abolishment of slavery in Jamaica and the English Commonwealth in 1833. Now, to replace the loss of labor, thousands of Chinese and Indians were sent to Jamaica, and not just to Jamaica, and also other parts of the Caribbean. In fact, I had a conversation with a young lady from Trinidad, and I said to you, and she said she's Indian and she's mixed with Cherokee Indian and so on and so forth. But as you know, Trinidad has 49%, or I think it's either 50-50, 49-51, 50-50, whatever the case might be, in terms of the demographics, the racial demographics there, or the ethnicity. But a large amount of Indians were sent to Trinidad. But to replace the loss of labor, thousands of Chinese and Indians were sent to Jamaica as bond servants, or what we call indentured laborers, who worked on the plantations for a small wage and or for a contractual period. And notice, they worked for a contractual period or for a small wage. As a result, by 1943, the Jamaican population was stratified along racial lines. By 1943, by racial lines. Now, Stone, in his book in 1973, argued that plantation societies produced a stratum of whites who were owners, managers, and protectors of property, middle stratum of browns who were associated with the professional, technical, and white-collar occupations, and the lower stratum of poor black slaves. Now we're talking about plantation society in the according to a book written by Mr. Carl Stone in 1973, looking at plantation society. Plantation society in the Caribbean, in the Commonwealth Caribbean, was stratified in a particular way. And we talk about the fact that they were owners, managers, and protectors of property. Middle stratum of brown people who were associated with the professional. The browner you are, the more you become integrated in the professional, technical, and white-collar occupations. And of course, there was a lower stratum of poor black ex-slaves. And if you look at society today, I mean, after the plantation society also mirrored that kind of plantation society. The plantation society almost mirrored the kind of society we have today. The plantation ideology and plantation society inform capitalist societies in terms of how we organize labor and how we organize work. Yes? But let us continue. He goes on to say that there was hardly any vertical social mobility permitted except for the movement of a small group of blacks from the lower to the mid. We talk about social mobility. What does class look like in the Caribbean from the plantation system up to now? And of course, there's not much difference. There's not much change really, except that now of course, the majority is now black people, and of course, black people have more opportunities. And the more educated you are in Jamaica, and the more you are seen as part of a middle upper class, so to speak. But still in Jamaica and many of the communities across the Caribbean, they have the wealthy Jews. There's a wealthy Jewish family. The Jews are the wealthiest. Yes. In almost across many of these societies in Western society, the Jews are the wealthiest. So we haven't talked about that, but that, and of course we have a small white group who we have certain racial group, the browner you are, and so on, stemming from the history that has and the history of inheritance, yes, that help to prop up certain people that continue their legacy of wealth and dominance in the world today. But yet there's still opportunities in the Caribbean for black and brown people, but still people, if you look at colorism and the issue of bleaching, and it's not bleaching or the changing of one's color to make you appear more browner. It's not just a Jamaican experience, it's all over the Caribbean, okay? And in many communities. And by the way, I was watching a news story about Black China. And now she no longer she wants to call her by her name. I think it was Angela White or something of the sort. But today I watched a story about Black China, which is an American celebrity or star, I believe. And she talked about how her life has changed and the inability to accept herself, and how she underwent surgery, biological surgery, to change her body, to change her constitution. And by constitution, I'm talking about the buttocks. To change her breast, to make it more appealing, and because a society that forces one to look a certain way and so on and so forth. But now she's She's now accepting herself, and she said, now, how have I rescued myself through sobriety? She said, now she's more sober, and so on and so forth. And not only that, she now has a doctorate in theology, and she's now rediscovering God. And I said to people, what is happening in our society today? Our society has become so secular. There is no marriage between secular and inspiration. We have a society today, there is no room for Jesus, yes, or no room for religion, no room for Allah, no room for Buddha, no room for the things of the spirit. And we talk about capitalist society was built on the Protestant ethic, but now we have become a society that was a facade. It was never built on the Protestant ethic. It was a facade. It was sold as a Protestant ethic, a society built on hard work and savings. But that was not the case. But she talked about how she's this Black China finding herself and an acceptance of self. And she shut down this talk of now X, what they call it, surgery, whatever the term is, but this plastic surgery society, a society of plastics.
Sir, sorry,
yes.
Don't mean to cut you. I just wanted to comment on that. I'd raise
Go
my
ahead.
hand. I'm not okay. Thank you.
Go ahead,
As there's something that you mentioned, and I just want to piggyback off of that. I mean, being a Christian, and most of us here, we are subscribed to the theology of the Bible, and.
Okay.
As human beings, what really governs our worldview is our philosophy, is the beliefs that we have. Yes. And a lot of people you see around doing all kind of things without all kind of inhumane acts and just doing things, just living. It is normally linked to their worldview and their perception. So as you're mentioning about Black China, and you're talking about where is the beliefs, basically. Beliefs, I believe, is what drives us. It guides us. How do we perceive life? What are our morals, our values? What are our ethics? What do we think? How do we view what is right and wrong? Because in one context, stealing can be wrong. In another context, it might not be wrong. You know? And then we can also, and there's something else I want to... Pardon me?
Who is
Patrice.
this?
Patrice.
Very good point. Very good point. I like how you are participating in the discussion and how you are targeted. Very good. Talking about the issue of worldview and morals and all of this affect. And when we talk about Caribbean thought and Caribbean thinking and critical thinking, that is important. That is exactly what I'm talking about. So, but sorry for cutting you. Continue.
That's fine. In addition to that, also, sir, I mean, like, if we don't have a belief system that governs and guides the way we think, and we don't have that, there's no room for introspection. And we see even the rich, the wealthy, they make it hard for persons to move up in the class. Yeah. So you find that those in the lower class, they're stagnant. There is little, like statistics show that it is rare that you find those in the lower class go upward in the social mobility. Why is that so? Because the rich, they try to take so much that they limit the resources and the accessibility for those that are in the lower class and those in the middle class, because there's so many because of capitalization and what is happening and greed, you know. And we see that we are living in a society that is not founded on merits, but it's really about nepotism, connectionism. So you find that I can be so qualified, but because I don't have someone from my lineage sitting in a prestige position, I am deprived of that opportunity. And also because I don't have the accessibility or don't have the links in society, I cannot go to certain universities and colleges, and doors are closed.
And even beyond that, and not just go to certain universities and colleges in Jamaica, but what about the issue of travel? Some people get to escape and others don't. talk about
that
in
is
the
so true, sir. I agree with Patrice 100%.
Yes. And Bob, say for example, Bob Marley. Bob Marley lived in Trenchtown. And Bob Marley lived in a very poor community. He was poor. And earlier, actually, I was watching a news story about Tupac Shakur. And Tupac Shakur's mother was very involved in the Black Panther movement. But just as Tupac Shakur came from dirt poverty, in fact, we talk about, there's people who are poor, but there are people who live in what is known as abject poverty, okay? Even below what people consider as poor. And so where many nights he didn't have any food. And there are many people who grew up like that. But of course, the beauty about living in Jamaica, the experience of poverty and the reality of navigating poverty might be a little bit different from the experience of poverty in the sense that when you live in a bucolic society that is tropical, you can go catch a fish. Yes, you can do creative things in that community, in a society like the US where you have Tupac Shakur living in the hood and so on and so forth. How does he feed his family? Can he climb a tree? Does he live in the South where they can agrarian society? But anyways, outside of that, Tupac talked about where he came from. But even after he made it in life and what he had, the creative things and the dangerous things that some of these people have to do. Okay. And the thing is people do things in order to make it. But then society, the system create laws, okay, that prevent any creation that you might have outside of the system that will propel you to the next level, okay? And so therefore, say, for example, I talk about the fact that the issue of marijuana, okay? There is they have legalized, it is legal to smoke cigarettes, but it is illegal to smoke weed. First of all, that makes no scientific sense if you study the science behind it. But when you start to study economics and you look at the Caribbean and what Jamaica is known and what Jamaica could have become. By the way, I had an article that I wanted to share with you on marijuana. Did I share it with you before? Wow, maybe I should, and talk about the science and the policy and how Caribbean people have shot themselves in the foot. Whether or not we're a theological seminary and we may have certain positions about what you smoke and so on and so forth. But of course, there are Anglican, there are people in certain churches that smoke cigarettes, okay? But of course, cigarettes has nicotine. Nicotine is more dangerous to the body. But of course, that's not the economic activity that Black people would use to make money. Caribbean people would be selling marijuana or developing dispensaries and using the proceeds like Colorado to make millions of dollars that contribute to its economy. Okay, but what they have allowed is that they have allowed international policy, yes, to prevent them from investing in a product where they can be king and make tremendous amount of money from. Whether it is a moral issue is one thing, but it is not a moral issue that has prevented Jamaica and the Caribbean from leading in an industry such as marijuana. What has been the conversation? And the conversation is more an international legal issue coming from pressure from the US. So when you talk about independence, are you truly independent? No, you're not truly independent. Not only was your independence and freedom granted to you by somebody else, but you can even, yes, promote and invest and market a product that is internationally known as Jamaican or Caribbean. Okay, so that now, because you're afraid of what the other might do to you, so that now you have countries like the US and Amsterdam and other countries are now developing the science and investing in a product that they had penalized you guys for doing. And now they're doing it and making big and leading, making much more money and leading the charge. And that goes to show how the system is stacked against certain people. And when we talk about social mobility, especially for people of color, irrespective of where you live in the world, okay, it is always the same that there are limitations that prevent you from carving out a competitive future for yourself and for your family. It's always an issue, generational wealth. And not only that, because we are so divided. And by the way, if you listen to my last podcast, not the last one, the one before the last one, I talk about generational wealth that has dogged Caribbean people. And my last class, is going to talk about that. When we're looking at what opportunities are there for people of color, what opportunities are there for the Caribbean to reinvent themselves. I want to talk about that in the last class, and we're going to get into it but I won't spoil it, I won't share it. But when you talk about social mobility, okay, first of all, there should be no mobility in any class. There should be no talk of mobility. There should be, okay, the issue of course, I'm a radical, so I don't believe in mobility. I don't believe in currency, because I believe currency is the death of humanity. We have, and I think it was Karen that talked about why we have to be when we look at society, why we have to look at society in terms of its currency and money. And I say the day when we invented currency, that is why I am up your street, Karen. Is Karen here? I don't know. Currency is the death, and of course it is tied to work, and work is tied to a valuation system where that is tied to money. That helps to maintain social mobility and hierarchy in society. But anyway, so Carl Stone in 73 talks about the Caribbean and Jamaica, the Commonwealth Society, and what it looks like. He goes on to say that there was hardly any vertical social mobility permitted, except for the movement of a small group of blacks from the lower to the middle, and that income was the principal. Income was the principal determinant of social status in Jamaica. On the other hand, income levels are highly correlated with racial group. So yes, although social mobility is now tied to, we're thinking about now it's tied to income, but not just income, but education. But still, on the other hand, income levels are highly correlated with racial group and class. The inequality among classes before independent Jamaica is represented in the disparity that exists between landholdings of groups. Now, and it's showed here, if you look at the diagram on the right of the screen, the percent of black population in economic sectors by occupation, 46% of the occupation agricultural sector, 70% personal savings, 10% manufacturing, 9% in construction, and 7% in unspecified jobs. But most of the people majority of the people the blacker you are, sorry, I apologize. The darker you are, you will find you will be working in the farms. And in fact, they develop agricultural schools, so majority of the Jamaicans, to teach Jamaicans agriculture. Nothing is wrong with that. Okay, and even though as we think about the future, we have to probably think about maybe we have to go back to the barter system and going back to backyard farming and agricultural stuff as we think about artificial intelligence replacing people's work. So all people are going to have to do now is create something and exchange it again, but create a sophisticated system to exchange. I don't know what that means. Or they're going to use a currency tied to how you work. Anywhere, it doesn't matter. How many tokens you give in today, I don't know what that the society is going to look like. But this is important, the point I'm about to make here. As we said that on the other hand, income levels are highly correlated with racial group and class. The inequality among classes before independent Jamaica is represented in the disparity that exists between landholdings of groups. The white upper class, which was less than 1% of the population, held about 43.3%. The brown middle class, 4.9%, held about 43.3%, 4.9%, sorry. And we must point out here that the classification grossly underestimates the growing middle class, which grew from 25% in 1961 to 37% in 1991. Now, I don't know what that means. There are people like Dr. Martin Oppenheimer, Professor Martin Oppenheimer, who wrote the book, The State of Modern Society, who said that there is no middle class anymore. There's no middle. Now there's no middle. You're either in the upper class or the working class. That's it. Okay. But according to Stone, by 1991, the middle class in Jamaica grew to 37% from 25%. So that class was based on occupation status as well as race. Now, Gordon explains that this growth, Derek Gordon in 1987, explains that this growth, this in terms of the middle class, or probably the working class, was at the expense of the lower classes. Those at the bottom of society experienced further abject poverty and inequality. Now, a small manufacturing sector was developed, and personal services and construction, transport, and communication sectors grew, so that by 1943, 46% of the Black population was in the agricultural sector, 70% in personal savings, and 10% in manufacturing. And that's represented by the figures below. But look at land holdings. Property is important. Look at on diagram 1, land holdings by racial categories between 1950s to 1972. People who are Caucasian, you see how much land holdings they had in Jamaica. While Black and brown, the majority of the population in Jamaica are Black and brown. But look at the land holdings. But yet some people want to believe that Jamaica was never classified along racial lines. But look at the figure here. In 1944, Jamaicans gained universal adult suffrage, which allowed them some semblance of decision making. And we could form a local assembly to steer our country towards independence. Now, Jamaica gained independence on August 6, 1962, and elected the Jamaica Labour Party as the governing party for the first 10 years after independence. Now, Jamaica under a JLP government followed a model based on what we call dependent development that the former colony had pursued. Dependent development, I mean they were dependent on other people to invest in their country in order. I know nothing is wrong with that, but when you are completely dependent on the external for your development, that's a problem. Okay. So Jamaica gained so for the first 10 years after independence, Jamaica under JLP government followed a model based on dependent development that the former colony had pursued since the end of the world wars. Now, let us look at what happened on the figure that I showed you earlier. Where is it? I showed you a figure earlier. From the 1960s. Look at the GDP growth. From the 1960s when Jamaica got independence. What I'm looking at is we were already declining prior to independence, but prior to about 1958, just when we discovered bauxite, we grew a little bit with some fluctuation, but it was always up, it was always above 1% growth. Okay, but in the 1960s, but between 1960 to I'm looking at the figure here, 1960 to about 1965, Jamaica experienced some growth. From about 1965 to about 1970. There was a decline, but it was still higher than where it's coming from the 1960s. Then it went back up. So there was some fluctuations there, so on and so forth. But so they followed that growth path of model dependent, but Jamaica growth was still up there, still high, fluctuated, but it was still at a very acceptable level. Okay, so I said to you that the economy grew in the 1950s and 60s by 5.8% per annum. And as bauxite and tourism outgrew agriculture as the main GDP earners, agriculture declined drastically in the relative share of agricultural outputs. For Jamaica, for Jamaica, agricultural output, and you see the table, securing greater wealth for the elites. Securing greater wealth, Jamaica was growing, but it secured greater wealth for the elites. The 1950s and the 1960s were so profitable for Jamaica that employment grew by 1.8%, unemployment declined, and economists predicted that Jamaica would be the pearl of the Caribbean, and not just Jamaica, but many Caribbean islands. And like Singapore of Asia, and in a previous class, I showed you how Jamaica and Singapore's GDP or economy rivaled each other. They were almost at the same level. Now, despite these economic gains in Jamaica, income inequality increased from 1958 to 1972, as the income of the bottom 40% fell from 8.2% to approximately 7% of aggregate income. And of course, in the 1970s, we had Manley and the experiment with socialist democracy, which I don't think I have time to get into for this class, because I think we mentioned it, but I talk about 1970s with Manley and the experiment with socialist democracy. PNP became the governing party in 1970s after JLP, Bustamante, so on and so forth. The National Party, PNP, became the governing party on a platform of national populism, moving away from dependent investment or capitalism to now we're now looking at national populism. That the apparent upward mobility that showed have followed economic growth. Now, please remember that we said that in the 1970s, the People's National Party won. And what was the platform again? National populism. And please remember that prior to this particular reading, I talked about what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and how a lot of the people in Jamaica at the time, I mean, we were gaining in Jamaica, but who was experiencing the wealth? Who was experiencing the gain? The elites. So by the 1970s, when PNP took over, they took over on a platform of national populism. And here we go, the experiment with socialist democracy. Socialist democracy, the experiment with social democracy was as a result of the experience of the past, where Jamaica was growing and booming, but the experience of it was limited in the sense that it was the wealth and the gains, the windfall, it was not extended to others, just to a few people. So by 1971, we said that poverty was over 30%, and the lower classes that heavily dependent on agriculture as their means of survival were displaced when tourism and bauxite replaced agriculture. So yes, so just also in the 50s you had bauxite, and in the 60s you have tourism was growing and booming, and so that agriculture was replaced. So what happened to all the people that was working in agriculture? So of course we talk about that economic growth in the long run. In terms of the lower classes, dependent heavily on tourism, and so the lower classes dependent heavily on agriculture. But tourism and bauxite replaced agriculture as the main engines of growth by the private and public sector. That's in the 70s. This led to mass migration from rural to urban areas and from Jamaica to the United States. Okay, you hear what I said just now? Many people thought that we were becoming a socialist country. This led to mass migration from rural to urban areas and from Jamaica to the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. By the 1970s, Jamaica's growth demanded more oil to fuel its small manufacturing sector and burgeoning consumption of electricity. That's important. So Jamaica used most of their income on what? On consumption. In the 1970s, remember, they got into power, the PNP got into power on a platform of national populism. They used all of the windfall gains to do what? To help boost the working class and the people who were now working in agriculture, who now, okay, and the poor people and people of color and so on and so forth, to spread the investments into the society. But that was a problem. That was a problem. Jamaica used most of their income and the windfall profits on consumption, and hence import-led expansion without expanding its productive capacities and modernizing its agriculture for even further growth and sustainability down the road to strengthen its small and vulnerable economy. That was the case, not just for Caribbean, but many other countries that were experimenting with democratic socialism. And this is a point that I have made before in this class, and I'm making it again. I am making it again. Jamaica's growth demanded more oil to fuel its small manufacturing sector and burgeoning consumption of electricity. Jamaicans used most of their income and windfall profits between the 50s and up to the 60s on consumption on this, of course, and hence import-led expansion without expanding its productive capacities, modernizing its agriculture for even further growth and sustainability down the road to strengthen its small and vulnerable economy. I started this class by talking about artificial intelligence. Earlier I referenced that AI, talking about repositioning ourselves. You notice every time I talk about an issue of a problematic issue, a challenge, I always intersperse or integrate the conversation of the day, talking about what opportunities we have to invent ourselves. Where did we go wrong? So it is also, we have to look, and I talk about our critique should be constructive. Now, Jamaicans led by the PNP, influenced by Cuba's Fidel Castro and the socialist imperatives in the region, engineered a political revolution that birthed Jamaica's socialist agenda in the 1970s. Now, this gave rise to democratic socialism as the PNP, the People's National Party, defeated the Jamaica Labour Party. Now, wealth was redistributed as the government promoted a socio-economic policy of what? Distributional equity. That coupled with the ideology of national populism. Yes? Now, please don't end this class. Don't leave the class yet. We're wrapping up in 50. Some of you did not join the class until 7:30. Okay? So I do not expect you guys to hurry up and leave the class at 10, right? And I had to wait on some of you. And by the way, we only had 13 people in the class today, and I have over 20-something people in the class. That's a problem. But we're wrapping up here. Jamaicans led by the PNP, influenced by Cuba's Fidel Castro and the socialist imperative in the region, engineered what? A political revolution that birthed Jamaica's socialist agenda in the 1970s. Now, this gave rise to democratic socialism as the PNP defeated who? The Jamaica Labour Party. Now, wealth was what? Was redistributed to the government, which promoted a socio-economic policy of distributional equity. And as a reaction to the ideological move, which also affected the profit margins of the wealthy capitalists. They fled the island. They left Jamaica and they left. They fled. Investments and foreign aid from the United Kingdom and the United States dried up. You're following me here, guys?
Yes, sir.
Dried up. Following me here. It's very important. This is an important class. Every one of the class is important. But this is good content for you guys to consider, to think about. In addition, the severe oil crisis of the 1970s, the neglect of the market, the neglect, talk about thinking in terms of what opportunities we have to reinvent ourselves. The neglect of the market. We talk about China has repositioned itself. China was a developing country. It is no longer a developing country. They have repositioned themselves and they have created a burgeoning and dynamic market so that corporations in America, multinationals, are racing to China to do business, so that even the NBA and HBO and the entire movie industry have to renege and to apologize and to stay quiet if China make any abuses, because they need China, because China has a market that many countries who follow an ideology of national populism seem to forget. Vietnam, in the last class, I said to you, Vietnam, they talk about creative Marxism. They are thinking strategically. They talk about strategy. Let me finish this very important point here. I say to you, As a reaction to the ideological move, which also affected the profit margins of the wealthy, the capitalists fled the island. Investment and foreign aid from the United States and the United Kingdom dried up. In addition, the severe oil crisis of the 70s, again, the neglect of the market to invest in the market, to develop the market. We're not talking about the market of Kingston, and you guys know what I mean, okay? But I just wanted to say that to be funny. I mean, I play upon words, pun. That's always funny to say. The neglect of the market, and by the way, there was one time they neglected Kingston market. You can't neglect the market, you have to develop the market where you are making the most money, and not only, and when you develop Kingston market, make it in a way so that people pay taxes, okay? So that they contribute to the economy, so that the Jamaican government can invest in their people, invest in their education, okay? Invest in our critical thinking so that they can become competitive and prosperous. Let us continue with this. This is very important. I'm wrapping up here. In addition, we said they neglected the market, and they said, okay, lack of adequate infrastructural development, the government's overall revenues and its ability to maintain spending were severely affected. Government spending spiraled out of control, expanded, coupled with corruption. Government spending spiraled out of control. Expanding the public sector being too top-heavy. And social programs, expanding the social programs. My connection is becoming unstable. I'm wrapping up in a second then. Nationalizing many private institutions and imposing market restrictions. This socialist policy, that was the socialist policy. These policies, very important. These policies, okay? This socialist policy undermined economic development and neoliberalism. Those were the policies I just reeled off just now. Those were the initiatives that they embarked on when they got into power. And these policies undermine economic development and neoliberalism. Other countries didn't, like Barbados and Trinidad, didn't do that. Guyana followed the same suit, did the same thing. Now, this socialist policy undermined economic development and neoliberalism, helped to undermine it. The government had well-intentioned policies, but neglected economic growth programs, thinking that development occurs magically while draining the profits of the small economy. The debt worsened, and investment aid and loans were difficult to ascertain, given the socialist programs which upset the neoliberals with the capital. Coupled with the oil crisis in the 1970s, and by the way, we're about to have an oil crisis now. By the way, what is oil in Jamaica now? What is a gallon of oil or a liter of oil or whatever the case? What is it? Russia.
So every Thursday, oil goes up. Even for cars, like for gas sales, for cars, like
every Thursday. Wait, stop. Hold up. Every Thursday, gas goes up.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sometimes it's coming by like probably $1 or $2. When it's going back $4, $3, and it's basically been going up.
Let me ask you, what was gas? What was the gas a month ago, and what is it now?
Let me give you an example, sir. 1 year ago, I could for my gas tank was about $5,000. Now it's about $10,000, $8,000 for my gas tank. My uncle was doing his from in about 2020, so his gas tank was about $7,000. Now we're going to $12,000.
Oh wow! So we're talking so you know, and just so you know, one of the economic factors that affected Jamaica was, or one of the decisions that affected Jamaica and the Caribbean was this oil crisis. OPEC decided to cut oil production, and guess what? They had already announced cutting oil production and already cut oil production by about 10 or 20 million barrels or 2 million barrels a day already. And now we are hearing that they have cut it again, even more cuts. When you do that, you cut oil supply, oil production. When you cut oil production, what does that do? When you study economics, and that's why I tell people don't want to learn about, people don't want to read it. People don't want to study stuff anymore. When I went to Bridgeport High School in Jamaica, I was the only student that was interested in economics, but I made it my business to study economics. Okay?
Sir.
What happened when you cut oil? And in fact, what is going to happen to Jamaica now? I'm telling you, between this week and next week, and by the way, oil in the US, I don't pay for oil because I drive a Tesla and it uses an electric and I just plug it in. But I'm just telling you, but if before I got a Tesla, gas was already high. And one of my friends told me that it was $3, $3.62, now it's $4.50 something per US for gas. What's going to happen in Jamaica and the Caribbean? Jamaica doesn't have oil. Are we going? Guyana has oil now, though. So what does that mean? Guyana has oil. Yeah, go ahead.
Even there was a major spike when the war with Ukraine started with oil in the oil business, because then from that time as well, I'll go up massively in Jamaica.
And can I tell you, it's about to go up again. I am telling you this. When you study what's going on in the economy, and whatever happens in the US, it also have a trickle-down effect in Jamaica, and especially in the Caribbean and in Jamaica.
It does, sir. It does.
It does. I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship between Jamaica and the Caribbean, especially the Caribbean and the US, and a lot of families, Jamaican families, live in the US. There's strong connections there. We are part of the Americas, and of course, and I say to people, I am vested in the US. Of course, I critique the US heavily because of what they have done in the world. But as responsible citizens, it is our responsibility to ensure that our governments are doing the right thing. They work for us. It's not the other way around. Okay? And every decision that they make will ultimately affect you. And that's exactly what happened in Jamaica and happening in Russia and in the world, where governments are making decisions and it's affecting people. You have a responsibility to know what's going on in your country. People have become so apolitical. And by apolitical, I mean indifferent to politics. And it is these same political decisions that is creating the realities that make the realities of their lives, that create social hierarchies in societies, yes, whether directly or indirectly. And we have a responsibility to hold our government accountable, to keep up the scrutiny, yes? And so I say to you, it is your responsibility to do so. And I say to you, when you look at what has happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, it is not just a failure of government, but it's a failure of people, a failure of citizenry. Okay. The other day I said to somebody, when you look at academic output amongst Black African Americans and people of color and people of the global South, it is bad. Okay. When you look at reading, they have libraries in Jamaica. I mean, when you look at how many people are signing up to be a part of reading competitions in the library, it is far cry from what it used to be in the 90s. It's even getting worse. People are not reading anymore. Okay, people are only reacting. We are thermometers, not thermostats. Yes? And so this class is very important for you guys, because you guys get to now reformulate and reframe our thinking so that we now can become thermostats, active contributors in terms of reading what's going on in society, reviewing the past, and then thinking about opportunities for the future. And one of that is by holding our government accountable, because what has affected the Caribbean, what has affected Black and brown people and people of color in the world is because of their indifference. Yes? And they have created the world. So fine, we have universal adult suffrage. We can vote now. So, okay, but that has not done anything remarkable. That has not done anything, because they are still apolitical. They're still indifferent. They don't know what's going on in society and in the world. Okay, we are far from that, but we are only reacting. We run up our mouth and want to mash up the place. Yes, but we're not involved in the politics. We're not, okay, we eschew critical thinking. We don't like to read. It is strategy. It is, and I say to people, oh, Renaldo, you're so complex. And I say to people, they have made society so complex. In order to unpack it, you have to develop the complexity of it. So you have to read it. It is based in philosophy that is Greco-Roman. You have to read Homer. Herodotus, and so on, Aristotle, Socrates. Or why you read them dead people? It is part of society. Why do we have to read that in Caribbean thought? It is part of, we in the Caribbean, we find ourselves inside of Western civilization. We are part of that Western civilization that has created and made society in such a way. So when we study society, we have to also study what has created Western civilizations. Because we are part of that, and the facade that has created hierarchies that maintain position in society. But let me finish this wrap up here by saying this last point, because we're not going to get to the 80s. This is the point. I say to you that the neoliberal forced the government of Jamaica to abandon social welfare and equity so that it could secure badly needed capital to pay its debt and workers and embark on long-term development. Again, let me read that again. Jamaica developed serious monetary and fiscal problems as it could not meet its expenses and the government could not pay its workers. The neoliberals forced the government of Jamaica to abandon social welfare and equity so that it could secure badly needed. They put Jamaica, they corner us now. Talk about Haiti. They use debt. Structural adjustment was a strategy for debt. You create debt. And I said to you, I mean, I won't even, okay, I'm getting into my element. Let me stop preaching now. Let me move. Let me stop. But we have to go to the 80s. The 80s, you talk about C.L.R and the acceleration of structural adjustment towards neoliberalism. It's even got worse in the 80s. Okay. By the 1980s, the government of Jamaica abandoned its socialist democratic rhetoric to garner international financial assistance. Things were so bad in Jamaica. And because that, of course, they were able to win the politics of the day. And by the way, this is in the 1980s. Now that we're in the 1980s, this is when I can talk about cricket, the evolution of cricket. At one time, if you are white or if you were too dark, you couldn't be West Indies captain. You know that. If you were too brown, sorry, if you were too dark, you will not be the captain of the West Indies cricket team. And I think C.L.R James talk about that, okay? Which we want to look at that at the next class.
But that was changed. That was changed because isn't Chris Gale dark?
Yeah, but he wasn't captain until I had said.
That's something that was changed. That was changed.
Eventually, it changed. But I just want to say, but that's why I said earlier, when you look at the evolution of how the Caribbean society is stratified, you want to take a look at cricket.
I understand that.
Yes, you know what I mean? And see the development of cricket, you know, and so on and so forth. So yes, so definitely. So that has changed a bit, but still there is still this ideology.
But sir, the part where you said about like brown people getting position, that's still unchanged, sir, because even offices they say that they have to be light skinned and pretty to become sales rep or office assistant or stuff like that.
Yes, in the professional, yes, I'm telling, and not only, but what about those at the hotel industries, in the hotels? What does the hotel industry look like? You have to look pretty, or you have to act a certain way. You can't act too Jamaican to meet the internationals, the foreigners. Yes. You have to, because they want to project a certain image, a certain picture. But let us go. So we have the 80s is a very interesting year as well. Edward C.L.R became Prime Minister of Jamaica. And I said to you that financial assistance to alleviate economic disequilibrium and balance of payment deficit. We needed help, and that is when you find the IMF and the World Bank. There was rapid help and assistance to alleviate the problem, because of course Edward C.L.R became the Prime Minister. He was very close with Reagan politics and Reaganomics. Of the expectation under Edward C.L.R was that neoliberal policies of structural adjustment, which included the privatization of public enterprises and the removal of price controls and trade restrictions, When you have a nascent country, a young country, just developing, new people, you have to have trade restrictions. The 1980s was too early for Jamaica to do away with trade restrictions. The 1980 was too early for Jamaica to do away with price controls. The 1980 was too early for Jamaica and the Caribbean and the Commonwealth Caribbean to engage in privatization of its public enterprises. The 1980s, because it was a time, in fact, if anything, Jamaica needed to have invested in its people. So I understand what Michael Manley was doing, but still they squandered the money. They wasted, they weren't thinking strategically. It was not the time for such economies to neoliberalize or to liberalize their economies, to open up their economies for penetration, yes, from the outside, because they would not be able to compete with countries that were advanced, that were already ahead in terms of their stage of development. And that was what China was saying, and many developing countries some years ago, when they did not want to sign the Paris Agreement about, or the Paris Accord about greenhouse emissions, because they're saying the US and these post-industrial countries, they are way ahead of the game. They are so advanced in the stages of development, they don't need to have industries that pollute anymore. But now they are telling other countries who are just at a lower stage of development, who need industries, telling them to get rid of pollution. So get rid of industries that pollute. But America had already done their polluting, and now move on to something else. I know they're telling China and the other world to do it. So we talk about do as I do, but not as I say, or Pharisaicism, or whether or not these countries, say for example, developing countries, countries of the global south, poorer countries, whether or not they have a right, yes, to experiment or whether or not they have a leeway, so to speak, or some latitude. Latitude is the word. Latitude, freedom, some leeway to be able to break this Paris Accord, to release into the air more emissions, while the post-industrial countries, they should limit what they have, since they have already reached a particular level of production. But anyway, so the expectation was that neoliberal policies of structural adjustment, which included the privatization of public enterprises and removal of price controls and trade restrictions, would speed up economic growth. That was the plan. And notice, I'm reading this in relation to what? The hypothesis and the research. Okay, the hypothesis and the research. The expectation was that neoliberal policies of structural adjustment, which included the privatization of public enterprises and the removal of price controls and trade restrictions, would speed up economic growth, increase productivity, and lead to job creation and even greater equity, as over time, economic growth should lead to economic equality, which Kuznets and others have theorized, and economists, Kuznets and others, just type in Kuznets, it will come up. He's a famous economist, and others. Etal means and others. Etal means and. So when you write, and you don't want to write out something, just put et al. And others have theorized, on the other hand, from 1985 to 2005, that Jamaica's economic growth has been very slow, has been flat, and employment in the formal sector decreased, and the debt has worsened, while poverty and inequity have declined. Poverty fell, but those who remained in poverty experienced worsening and abject poverty. However, economic restructuring towards a market economy was slow and haphazard, as the government continued to decreasingly to provide social security, and so on and so forth. But let me wrap up this. And by the way, I didn't send you chapter 3, which was a problem. Why didn't I send you chapter 3? Because you do not have access to this book. It's not available. I mean, it is at the library, and I think and some of you might have access to it. But what I will do, I will try, and Chantal, you didn't add that to the list of things for me to do. I was supposed to send you chapter 3 of neoliberalism so that you guys can have it. So this particular chapter 3 of neoliberalism, you will need for the exam. Limitations of Garveyism, you will need for the exam. Caribbean Fanonism, you will need for the exam. So I will send you a copy of chapter 3 and the chapter on Garveyism, the chapter on Caribbean Fanonism. Okay, I will send you those chapters. Now, just so you know, guys, because I won't be able to wrap up to go to the 90s. But I talk about NAFTA, that today the sugar and banana industries are in decline, partly due to the ending of trade preferences with Britain from NAFTA agreement. We talked about that already. Jamaica's tourist industry has strengthened and is of a high standard, attracting 2.9 million visitors a year. Pre-COVID-19 figures. Now, our bauxite, Jamaica's bauxite has, until recently, been expanding. The overall unemployment has declined from 15% in 1990 to 10.6% in 2008. This decrease is partly due to the growth of the informal sector. The informal sector, which I'm never going to talk about, which you can't talk about the global south countries and former colonized countries and African American communities without talking about the informal structure, informal economic activity. Some of which is legal, some of it is not legal. But we have to talk about that. But employment has declined from 15% to 10.6%. The decrease is partly due to growth in the so yes, employment in the formal sector has declined, in formal jobs and so on. But in the informal sector, like panhandling, so on and so forth, music, so on and so forth, the informal sector it has increased. That has taken up the slack from 28% of GDP in 1989 to an estimated 43% in 2001. Probably one of the several contributors to a significant reduction in poverty. We talk about reduction in poverty level. What contributes to poverty if all of this, in spite of all of the negativity, all of the lapses in growth and so on. And it's because of the growth in the informal sector, yes. And I said, and even as President Trump dismantled NAFTA, and that was while he was president, signaling an end to American imperialism and penetration. He revised it. This is the last point. He revised it to have conditions that favor the United States. He revised it to have conditions that favor the United States. And that's fine. That's understandable because we talk about competitive nature of the world. Now, how do we respond? How do other people respond? Now, it was only dismantled in the first place to reset the stage as other countries were catching up to the US. When the rules no longer favor the rich, they changed the rules to continue their advantage. I will stop there. Now, there is also the 1990s to 2000, talking about the WTO, NAFTA, more hardship, and PATH, P-A-T-H. There's that. And then, of course, the effects of neoliberal global recession on Jamaica and the Caribbean. I should talk about that. What observations can be made about poverty and income inequality in Jamaica? And I need to share that. That's also part of chapter, and then we will stop there. Chapter 4 looks at the evolution of neoliberal structuring adjustment in Jamaica. I will not touch this chapter for the class. We won't have any time. When you get a chance to buy the book, buy it. Okay, you will love it. By the way, there's part 2 coming out. And you're gonna, but part 4, I will give you the free chapters of chapter 3, and the other chapter is for you guys for free of cost. You guys don't have to pay anything. I'll send it to Chantel, and she'll send it to you. But there is one other chapter that I wanted to read was Caribbean Faunism and Garveyism. I won't have time for that. Okay, guys. Towards the end of chapter 3. I do look at the socio-economic context of Jamaica towards the end of chapter 3. This is how I ended it. I said this, and I'm gonna stop. I said this in chapter 3, and I end here. And the last topic in chapter 3 was the effects of neoliberal globalization. But I said unemployment has declined. Oh, sorry. I said in the end. I said earlier we explained that from 1971. Oh, sorry. This is the question. Oh, fine. Oh, great. What observations can be made about poverty and income inequality in Jamaica? Or perfect end. This is how we will end this class. This is the end right here. I have 2 minutes or 3 minutes. This is how we end it. This is important. What observations can be made about poverty and income inequality? Firstly, poverty is concentrated among the young and the old. Of course, those considered poor. 50% of those considered poor, 50% are younger than 18 years of age, and another 10% are over age of 65. Now, secondly, poverty is mostly concentrated in rural areas. Rashawn, is it Rashawn? Is Rashawn here today? I think Rashawn was talking about his social mobility and how he moved from, and when his movement from rural Jamaica to urban Jamaica has also saw a change in his social and his socio-economic reality. Is Rashawn here? Was that Rashawn?
No, sir, not here. Is not here, sir.
None of the men are in class today? Wait, is there any male in class today?
Jason is here, sir.
But okay, no, it wasn't Rashawn, it was Jason. It was Jason. Jason, where are you, Jason? Let me stop this share for a second.
Sir?
Jason, how come I didn't hear you today, Jason? Jason is the only male in the class today. I wonder why.
I was listening on, sir.
That's good. I'm happy you're here. Good,
no,
good.
I was traveling, sir.
Let me see. I mix you up with Rashawn.
You hearing me, sir?
Where are all the? Why is it that all the? What happened to the guys in Jamaica? In my class. Why is it that we only have one and the last week? They're on break. Why are they not listening?
He's not well. He's not feeling well today, Annie.
But last week he was not. The week before last he wasn't in class. And last week we never had a class.
He actually logged in a sir. He was here earlier, but he left early, Annie.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
No, man, because he's not well.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I need to speak with. Okay, Chantel, we have our work cut out for us. The students who are not at class today, we will reach out to every one of them. I want to know why they weren't here. Okay, and each of them will have to do an essay. Any student that missed this class today, because I do not want to fail you guys, you will have to do a makeup for this class. You will have to give me an essay summarizing what was discussed in today's class. And if you missed last week's class, if you want credit for, I haven't started marking the register for the entire semester yet. You get 20% once you come to this class. You are absent for the class, you're going to have to do, and you want to get credit for this class, fine, I'll give it to you. You're going to have to do a makeup. Yes.
So you said last week class, there was no class last week, sir?
No, there was no class. So that's fine. But if the other classes, I realized that less and less people, we have over 24 people in the class, and people are not coming to, and this is an online class. What is going on? So this is it. People who fail to come to the class, or if you are cardinally late by over an hour, you have to do. So myself and Chantel, we're going to go to work this weekend or later on, or next couple of days, marking the register, looking at what's going on, who is absent, who is not absent, and we're going to give you an assignment. We're going to make it up. You're going to make an assignment. Your job is to summarize in 2 to 5 pages, summarize the class by watching the YouTube video and summarizing the class. So you have to submit it by the next class, okay? By the next class, those who, and please, if you know of anyone that's not here, let them know that, hey, and by the way, I am clearing my, and Chantel reminded me, I'm clearing my schedule for 2 days next week. It's all going to be JTS stuff because I want to sink my teeth into this. I want you guys to get the full gamut of the course. And if you miss the course, that's fine. I won't mark you absent, but I won't mark you absent. I mean, if you miss the class, as long as you submit a summary of this class. But as of next week, we have last 2 class. I am asking if all of you could come to the class. If you guys have group members who are not here, please tell them to come. The last 2 classes major. I want you guys to be here for the class, to get the information, to be part of the discussions. It's very important. Okay. But anyways, let me wrap up this. But Rashawn, I don't know if it was Jason Lawrence or Rashawn. Was it Jason or Rashawn? Was it Jason that moved from rural to the urban, or was it Rashawn? Who was it? Was it Jason? Jason, was it you?
What, sir? Go again.
That told me about you moving. No, it wasn't Jason. No. It was Rashawn. No, I remember what Jason looked like now. It's in my, but Rashawn, I know it was Rashawn that talked about him moving. And I just referenced, when we talk about what observations can be made about poverty and income inequality in Jamaica, I said, firstly, poverty is concentrated among the young and the old. Of those considered poor, 50% are younger than 18 years of age, and another 10% are over the age of 65. Now, secondly, we said that poverty, this is the last point, is mostly concentrated in where? Rural areas. 80% of the poor live in rural areas, and less than 10% live in Kingston metropolitan area. Now, thirdly, 66% of poor households are headed by women, although women head only 44% of all households. Yes.
Sorry to cut you. I'm seeking to have an appointment with you, sir.
Okay, any appointments, please? Fine, all right. Okay, Chantel now manages my diary, my calendar. Any appointments, you have to go through her because I'm so busy. She manages my diary and she keeps me on top of my thing. And I'm going to make a major announcement in the future about Chantel. But for now, she manages the lecturer's time as it relates to my appointment. So I would love to see you, by the way. I'd love to speak with you guys. So if you, and I would love to speak with you. And because I'm not good at keeping appointments, I've asked Chantel to make sure that I keep my appointments. So if I make an appointment with you, I'm not going to keep it. But if you make it with Chantel, I will keep it because she makes sure I keep my appointments. So speak with her if you need to make an appointment with me. And to be honest, I would love for all of you to make an appointment with me because it shows interest. It shows that you guys are really interested in what we're doing here. And we're doing a lot of stuff, just so you know. What we're doing here goes beyond this class, just so you know. And I want all of you to be a part of that, especially those of you who have been so committed. You come to every class and so on. I want you to keep in touch, and we're going to be talking about what we're going to be doing in the future, and so on and so forth. But I was finishing up class, and this is a very important point, saying that thirdly, when we think about poverty in Jamaica and the Caribbean, we say that 66% of poor households are headed by women, and it's not just Jamaica. In almost all African American community, we talk about the Black position. When you study Caribbean, it's like studying Caribbean. It's people of color in other parts of the world. Okay, it's not just a Caribbean thing. It's also here in America, here in Philadelphia. 44% of all households, poor households, are headed by women. Fourthly, poverty lives among larger families, with 40% of poor families consisting of 6 or more members. Now, earlier, we explained that from 1971 to 1993, the top 20% experienced a sharp fall in their incomes, while the bottom income groups all had increases in their incomes. We showed that the Gini coefficient, and what's the Gini coefficient? Gini coefficient measures income elasticity or income inequality in a society. Again, I will ask this in the exam, and I'm telling you this right now. What does Gini coefficient measures? Does it measure corruption index? Does it measure income inequality? Does it measure inflation? Answer, it measures income inequality in society. Know that. Okay, and we showed that Gini coefficient fell from 0.5, and it goes from 0 to what? From 0.3% to 0.362. This suggests that Jamaica had greater equality. The improvement was the result of the intervention of the government of Jamaica. However, due to the acceleration of neoliberalism in the decade of the 1990s and 2000s, marked by greater financial deregulation and market reform, the economy underwent a financial collapse and an economic recession that disproportionately affected the poor and working class. The poor and working class experienced a sharp fall in their incomes, while the incomes of the richest remained the same or increased, thereby pushing the PR ratio from 4.2% to 53%. You don't need to know that part, but Gini coefficient measures income inequality. That's very important. I will send you a copy of this. And
that is where we end today. When we come back next week, and let me stop here.
When we come back next week, let me stop. So when we come back next week, this is what we will talk about. We will talk about, again, for next class, next week, Friday, Walter Rodney and the struggle for democracy in Guyana. I didn't talk about it. I wanted to finish what I was dealing with last week. We will quickly look at that. You guys can even read. I think Chantel has the link. She maybe send it to you. You guys can start reading. Go to the Jacobin and type in Guyana. Jacobin, Jacobin, type in Guyana, and a lot of stuff comes up about the Grenada, Guyana, so on. Grenada's revolution should never be forgotten. that was in the 1980s, and we talk about the 1980s. So when I come back, we just talked about the 1980s in Jamaica. What's going on in the other parts of the Caribbean? Let's look at, when we come back, we will start with Grenada and Guyana. Then we will go into, we will talk about the era of decolonization. West Indies cricket refused to grovel. And we will wrap up next week by looking at C.L.R. James and the Black Jacobins. We will only have an hour and a half for that discussion. Then the last hour and a half of the class will involve a quiz, and then we will discuss the quiz, which will formulate and inform the exam. So that's what for next week. Then week after next is the last class, I believe. I'm not sure. I think it's the last class, and that's where we talk about podcasting, blogging, or expressing one's thought, Caribbean thought. Okay? And what we plan to do with in terms of your journals and so on and so forth. I want to know where you are with your journal. That's why I actually need to meet with you guys in the week. Beyond next week, I need to meet with you to find out what's going on with your paper, with your research. Some of you were supposed to some of you sent me some powerful papers, which I love. I haven't finished grading it yet. Some of you sent me some concept documents for your final research paper. That's great. The concept paper, the final research paper is worth 40% of your final grade, okay? So it's important that you guys are working on that together. And if you have ideas that you want me to go over, please let me know.
Sir,
That's
a question
yes.
before.
Yes.
You said
Go
the
ahead.
final research paper. I was one. My group has sent several papers to you, so I don't know if it was supposed to do any more research paper based.
No. You just need one.
That was never communicated to us.
One. Okay. I said to you guys, the exam is worth 20%. And I said to you also, sorry, is it 20%? I think attendance is also about 20%.
Yes, sir. 20%, sir.
And a piece of work. So that's 40%, 5% for extra credit for if you publish a paper, another, and then I said 40% for the final essay paper, which I am making it easy for you to do. I told you guys how to do it as a group paper. So that final group paper that you have submitted, if you submitted a group paper and it's final, that's fine, I'll mark it. Okay, but if it's not good, I'll send it back and say, please update it because you have a lot more, you have a lot of time, okay? So,
sir, I didn't hear you.
We don't have a lot of time because we're near to the end of the month. And just like Patrice's group, our group has sent in quite a bit of papers.
No, what I'm saying is that
we have not had any feedback.
Okay, no, okay, some of you, yeah, your group, I think, I know who is talking. I don't, who is speaking to me now? Is it Christine?
Christine, sir.
Right, you have, and your paper was amazing, and I said I'm actually going to publish, your group will get a 5% extra grade, extra. Each of you will get because the paper that you submitted was beautiful, loved it. And that's what happened when you submit amazing work. But I will talk with you guys about that. Set up some time to meet with me, each of the group. I want the groups to meet with me this week, and I will talk about what you have submitted. If your paper is, if you have the research paper is due at the end of the semester. So what I'm saying, if you submitted a research paper already and it needs improvement, that's great. You would have completed most of the stuff. All you need to do is just improve it and tweak it because you still have time. Okay. But
sir,
I will.
We're gonna know if we improve it, sir.
Huh? Well, listen. You have even. You have at this. No, you have until the end of the class of the last. No, I think the last class is not when I think you have an additional. I usually give my students about a week or two to edit and to wrap up the paperwork because you have extra time. I said to you, listen, I wrote a book. And let me tell you the amount of editing and the second book, you know why the book is delayed right now? The second book, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered. Do you know why that's delayed? It's delayed because it's been edited and edited and we're still, so I thought I was done and I wasn't. That's the nature of academia. And that's when you want to, and especially when you're doing a paper or a research paper that I'm planning to publish, we want it to be good. So even if I decide that I'm going to publish a paper in an academic journal, and then therefore I will have conversations with you guys to to do to improve it, because we're going to give you guys you guys will get publication rights as well. You guys will be included in the rights and so on, and your name will be will be all over the world. Okay, and you want to put something
sorry,
that is
I'm
beautiful.
cut you again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
My group has sent 2 papers that you have not responded to. So as it relates to improving, say, what paper need improving, or we need to work on those 2 outstanding papers. Now, you would have commented on another paper that would have done, but we're talking about these 2 papers now. So in case we need to
you said
improve
the papers
paper,
that
exam is just around the corner, sir. And
Yeah.
some of us are doing plenty of courses. So
So you don't want to improve the paper, you just want to submit it.
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that at this point, in time, I am finished with 95% of my assignments. This is study time now.
Okay. Well, can I tell you what the research paper does? It helps with your study. It's always prepared for the exam. But this is what I'm going to say to you guys. If you have submitted paper drafts, and any work that is submitted before the deadline is a draft. It's a draft. I'm gonna review it, and I'm gonna try. Which group is this, Christine? Okay, fine. I have to review your guys' work as quickly as possible and send it back if there's any changes that need to be. I'm quite sure there are going to be recommendations. I'm telling you that, but it's not going to be major unless you have plagiarized. And by plagiarized, I look out for plagiarism. Plagiarism is where you use somebody's work. That's the most thing I look out for, using somebody's work and take it as your own. It's very important, and documenting properly. Okay, so you have to ensure that there is a bibliography or a reference page, and ensure that if you use footnotes, you have the corresponding number that corresponds to the footnotes. If it's bibliography, it's in parentheses, and of course it's followed Caribbean style or MLA style or whatever the style that is used by JTS.
There is APA style out there, sir. Right now.
APA and okay. And if you use Microsoft Word to type, go into the formatting and click on the computers that we have now can help to edit your work. Trust me. You just click on APA. It will if you have an updated Word, it will ask you what referencing or documenting system that you are using, and it gives you APA, MLA, whatever. You click on APA, and then it will also help to create your bibliography, create your reference. Trust me, once you stick it in, it organizes it for you. I'm telling you, it is very helpful. So that's something that you can utilize. But if you have submitted, now I'm going to be looking over I'm going to return you many of your work. If you guys have submitted paper, I'm going to return the discussions I had or the conversations I had with the paper, and I would of course provide a paragraph or an essay responding to your paper. If there are any changes, major changes, of course I'm going to tell you you're going to have to change it. Okay. All right, but that's where we end today. Yes, go ahead.
My hand's been up for a while. Sir, I'm asking you, sir, because the research paper, sir, how many pages is that?
That's 25 pages.
And sir, when we started, sir, right, you said that about 3 weeks ago, sir, you said that you
No. We started.
Sir, when you said that you would have walked through the research paper and what would expect and everything I used to talk about. Sorry, you didn't do that, sir. So now when we have 2 weeks left now, sir, we never spoke about research paper. We have no idea of topics or anything. Now is when you're going to tell us about.
No, Tatiana, stop. I will not allow you to continue because you are misrepresenting me. And you are saying something, and you're telling me I did not do something that I clearly know I did. I have been
sir, I'm not going to.
Let me finish.
Even now, I communicate with a classroom. I remember when you said that, sir. And then I communicated with my group.
This is the point I'm making, though. I said to you guys, this is the point. I said to you, we're going to have a meeting outside of class. And if any group wants to meet with me, we put you guys in group. Okay, let me say this. I am disappointed. I put you guys in group. And that is why I said I have to stop you. And I'm not upset with you or anything. But I put you guys in group and I said, choose one of the research paper. And did you guys read the
Sir, you put, sir, I'm not mean to, sir, you put us in breakout.
Are you guys in a group?
And you did not.
No, not a breakout room. You guys are supposed to be in a group. And I asked, you guys are supposed to be in a group.
Sir?
Yes, Christine.
Mr. McKenzie, could you please allow her to finish? Because I would like to add something to what she's saying, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, because what Tash is saying, I do support. We have, remember, from the get-go, you have been telling us that you're not working strictly with the course outline, and that the course outline continues to change. And what you have been doing is giving us assignments at the end of the classes for us to do in our groups, which is what we have been submitting. I'm not talking about all the groups because I don't know what all the groups have been doing. But in terms of a final assignment we can do at the end of the class, it's the first I'm hearing about that. And to be fair, sir, some of us are doing 5 and 6 courses, and they're all heavy courses. Second and third year.
Right, thank you.
Hold on, Mr. Carp. Can I please finish? Yes. I only participate when you ask me to participate or if I have something to say. So please allow me to finish. So for you at the second to last class to be saying that we have this, remember we have exam, the format of the exam has changed. We no longer have the latitude of 48 hours to go look in books. We have to be studying because it's essentially a face-to-face exam, except that we'll be distant. So to be going into a research paper when we have other final papers to do is somewhat unfair. Now, I did hear you say that for those who have submitted papers, then we can use that as the final paper. And I want that to be open for everybody because we really don't have the time to go do a final research paper that's worth 40% of our grade at this point.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Tamar. You guys don't listen. I completely disagree with you, Christian and Tamar. I'm trenchant and firm now. I'm going to say this. And I want you to go and watch all of the videos, and that's why I record my videos. I want another student to... okay, fine. Let's have a discussion. Another student, what was your expectation? Maybe it wasn't communicated clearly. I said to you, I given you the research paper. The Caribbean Thought Outline courses. I said to you, we're going to put you guys the outline. I sent you guys the Caribbean Thought lecture notes. I said, I may not have time to go through it, but I discussed what I may not go through the course outline from cover to cover. But what I did do was to tell you what the expectation for the class is. And I said to you, you have 4 things to do. 1, each of you give me a piece of work, which I will grade. 2, 20%. I told you exactly what needs to happen. And maybe you weren't at the last class, Christine. Maybe you weren't at the last class, Tamar. I don't know.
Sir, I don't miss your classes.
Not at the last class.
I don't miss your classes.
But listen what I'm saying.
Not just that. One of the classes when somebody talked to you about assignment specific to the course outline, you said that we're to use our initiative and submit individual assignment. And somebody, I don't remember if it was Patrice, said to you that
I am muting. Nobody will speak until I have allowed you to speak. Allow me to make my point. You will not speak until I have given you the chance to speak. Now, you are not being truthful. And you are not being truthful because you have not attended all of the classes. You have not attended all the classes, or you are either late, or you are not reading. You're not reading the course outline. I said to Chantel, we're gonna listen to what I'm saying. We're gonna put you guys in groups. And I said this from the first class, I have several questions on the course outline, on the syllabus, and in Caribbean Thought lecture presentation, and I outline it. And every time I even sent a lecture summary to you guys, and I said to you, put yourselves in groups, okay? And I said, you are required to do an essay paper. There is no class that doesn't have an essay paper. I said, you will do an exam. You'll do an essay paper together. And instead of doing it individually, you'll do it together, 25 pages. And I clearly went through that. That I went through twice. And I am going to tell you, if I recorded every single one, and this is an online course, an online college course. It's available on JTS Online, and I clearly outlined that. I clearly outlined it in the syllabus, okay? I clearly outlined it in the Caribbean Thought lectures. I clearly outlined it in several emails I sent to you what the expectations are, okay? I have clearly said that. And I have had 4-hour classes, 5-hour classes, and I've said to you, the expectations are that you come to class regularly, you give me an individual piece of work so I get to know you and get to know your work, and and to make it easy for you. Let me tell you, the previous class, they all did an essay. They did more work than you guys, okay? But I wanted to cut it down. I said, I said, the expectation for this class is that we will do, my plan is for you guys to complete an essay together, 25 pages, and I said to you in one of the class, you guys can divide up the work, okay? And I said I wanted to meet with you sometime to talk about the essays in the group, the essays you are doing. And I said you can, even in the group, one person does the introduction, one person do the chapter 1 and 2, another person do the conclusion. I have said that over. I have communicated that to you over and over. But the thing is, this is the problem. People come to the class late. Students are not reading. Students come haphazardly, okay? And I'm telling you, that is the problem. Some people, and I'm telling you, that has been the issue. So I am saying to you now, if you were reading the syllabus, then you would clearly see where I said, this is the expectation for class. If you visited the JTS Online, I said, this is the expectation for class. If you follow the YouTube videos, and the podcast, and the recordings, and the summaries I have submitted, and the Caribbean Thought summary I have sent to you guys, with pages and pages, I have outlined the expectation. One of the class, I even summarized, I used to summarize 2 or 3 of the classes. I summarized for you guys. I summarized the class and sent it to you, and I said, for this class, I want you guys to do talk about what happened in that particular class, but start working in your group, start thinking about the essays, the research, because I said to you guys, don't just think about the exam. The most important thing for this class is the research paper. The most important thing for this class, and each of you have to, and I said to you, each group must choose one essay question that you will need to do, okay? I said that to Chantel, I said that to you, and I said, Chantel, help to organize the group, the class, in groups of 5. And this group of 4, and the groups will each choose a question. Now, the question, and I said to you one week that, for next week, I wanted you guys to start meeting in your groups, thinking about the papers that you're going to be doing, start putting the papers, start thinking about the research, start working on the research paper. And I have said that. I have also said, I have said this, that if you don't want to do any of the research questions, that I have asked, you can do another question and I will talk about it. And we could explore. But I said that the paper, I said, don't just think about passing the exam. I said, the exam is only worth, and I said that to you guys over and over and over, the exam is only worth 20%. The most grades come from the research paper, which is 40% of the grade. I have said it. If you look at the marking scheme clearly outline what I'm grading for. Attendance, yes? And attendance, you get credit for paper, and I've said that over and over. So to hear that you guys are saying that, I am disappointed. Okay?
Sir, 1 minute, please. All right. Chantel.